I got mine. Works for the post office.
Welcome. Welcome to the Centerville City Council meeting being held on October 5th at 7 p.m. at the Centerville City Hall. Let's go go around the room for the council people that are present, starting with Councilman Ince.
Ince, present.
Ivy present.
Fillmore present.
Meekum present.
And Councilman McEwen's asked to be excused, so we have 4 of the 5, so we have a quorum, so we can proceed. Let's begin the meeting with a prayer or thought by Councilwoman Meekum.
Our kind Heavenly Father, we're so grateful to meet here tonight as a council representing our city. We ask you to bless our city, to bless our citizens, to bless our first responders, and bless all those that are helping keep us safe and our country free. Please bless the leaders of our country, that they will be able to be guided to make the decisions that are best for us. Please bless us as a council representing our citizens, that we will be able to work together and that we will be able to make decisions that will be best on behalf of our citizens. We say this prayer in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councilwoman. If you'd all rise and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We welcome all those that have joined us tonight. We have a couple of items tonight that will be on a public hearing. And in addition to our public hearing, the next thing that we do is our open session. Now, I bring that up because the public hearing items is going to be a zone map amendment in regards to the young power sports. And there's public hearing also on the general obligation bond for the cemetery. So if your comments you have now are on either of those two subjects, just hold off until those other discussions. But if it's on anything else, it is now an open session where you can come up to the mic. We're going to put up on the screen for those that may call in. There's the dial-in number 1-346-248-7799 and a meeting ID and passcode. We will give you some time to try and get logged in, and I'll look at our city recorder to see if anybody that's logging in has any comments to say. But in the meantime, while we're doing that, I will open the open session for everyone, and those in particular here in the hall, if you have anything that you want to come to the pulpit right up front here. I'm used to these sides. Right up front here, and just state your name and where you're from. So that is now open. Try and keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes.
Kyle Green, I live at 433 East 200 North here in Centerville.
Welcome, Kyle.
Glad to be here. I just want to get up tonight and to express my appreciation to the council, the mayor, all those who work hard every week and take care of the issues and other things. I'd particularly like to just, as it's campaign season and I've seen a lot of back and forth and things on different topics, I'd like to just share my appreciation for the current council, who has strived to be diligent in using public funds wisely and taking care of the needs of the city versus the wants. A lot of times I think it's easy to say we want, but there's a lot of needs that need to come first. And so I appreciate the efforts that have been made to put those needs before the wants. I know that it's easy to look at other cities around us and say, well, they have X amount of pickleball courts, or they have this amazing water park, or they have a lot of different things, but in reality our city's small, and I appreciate the fact that you take into account the money that comes out of the citizens. I realize that this year we had to have a property tax increase, and I understand trying to keep up with those things, but I also appreciate that we haven't gone looking to spend a lot of money on a lot of niceties when there's a lot of necessities that are still needing to be taken care of. We have a lot of roads, a lot of sidewalks, a lot of things that are just starting to look old and tired in our city. And I think that that needs to be the focus of our council, this council, the council that's about to be elected, those who are on the council in the future, to look to the necessity first before the niceties. I don't think there's anybody on this council, I've heard a lot of talk about the trails and things like that on the mountain. I don't think there's a single council member that would say that they are anti-getting people outside to get exercise, that are anti-using our mountains, anti-using trails. But I think there are few that will stand and say, those are niceties, not necessities. And I appreciate that in the current atmosphere where it's hard on everybody, with the cost of fuel going up, the cost of food going up, the cost of everything going up, property taxes going up, that you concentrate and put those efforts on the necessities versus the needs, or the wants. I appreciate that. I also want to give a shout out to Centerville PD, who's been doing a fantastic job of helping mitigate the deer issue that we've talked about on many occasions. Really appreciate them and the professionalism which they're showing and the discretion which they're showing to do it safely and properly. And those are my comments for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Thanks for your comments, and thanks for all you do as a resident of the city as well. Others?
We have one on Zoom ending in 7256.
Okay, they will be next.
My name is Neil Tanner. I live at 573 East, 550 South, just west of the cemetery. And I would like to express my appreciation to the city and the council and all those who were involved in the cleanup efforts that went on and just served for the 9/11 effort. I know there were a lot of projects that were done around the city, and I've observed some of the effects of that. And since we live just immediately west of the cemetery, we particularly have noticed the improvement in the west boundary of the cemetery. And we very much appreciate the effort. We were out there working along with everyone else, and I was just amazed. I suspect there might have been maybe at least 50, maybe even 100 people that came and worked. And I saw people who were as tenacious as I might have been in reaching in amongst those big rocks and pulling out individual weeds and really doing a good job of cleaning things up there. And I want to express my appreciation to the city and to everyone and to the council for your efforts in getting behind that project and for supporting it. I think there was a lot of good feelings that were generated. The people that I talked to up there were very friendly. I met some old friends that I haven't seen for years, so we had some pleasant conversations that way as well. So again, thank you for all that you've done and for the results of that project.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a wonderful day. We knocked out a lot of projects in the city. Online, just identify yourself and where you're from. You still there, Jennifer? Online? Question? Phone number enter in 56.
I think they can hear
Them to
us.
unmute.
You what?
Did they ask, did they want to say something, or did you just notice they come on?
They had
Jennifer?
just logged in, so
Okay.
maybe.
Maybe they don't want to say
She's
anything.
talking.
Anybody else here that's in person while we're trying to get that one worked out? I don't see any others on the screen that have joined. at least for the open session.
You are unmuted.
Yeah, you're unmuted.
Hi.
You're unmuted.
Yay. This is Laura Eliason. I am a resident of Centerville. And I know that on the agenda is talking about the 4th of July and how that went. And I just wanted to give a great big thanks for an awesome 4th of July. I have been handicapped for about 2 years, and so learning how to get around. And I attended the, when we have Santa come at the smaller park over there, and tried to coordinate getting parked close enough and getting around over there. And I really wanted to do the 4th of July and trying to figure out how to coordinate dealing with my handicap there. And I was just blown away at how much easier it was to get around there. There was much more handicap parking than there was at the old park. So we had no problem at all getting a parking place for me, getting my wheelchair out. The parking lot was great. And then having everything down the sidewalk on both sides of the sidewalk, I was able to do that great with my wheelchair instead of going around on the grass where we had it before. And then I was able to just go through the ballpark field thing, like where they're actually hitting the ball and stuff, like where the dirt was. We went through there and it was all stamped down great for my wheelchair. And then we just laid out a blanket on the ground there. So it was really, really handicap accessible. I didn't have any problems with getting around there, much easier than the other park. And the view, we didn't have trees in the way of the fireworks. And just loved the view, loved how we could spread out and be comfortable. I heard lots of great compliments on it, so I just wanted to leave my compliment about not only how wonderful it was, but how handicap accessible it was, which was something that before I became handicapped, I wasn't as aware of, but now that I am, I'm extremely aware of the differences of ease and getting around places, and it was amazing, huge difference. So thank you all, and thank you, Kim and committee, for the best 4th of July ever.
Thank you, Laura. We're glad you're handicapped. We were able to make that possible for you. Thank you. Any others online or in the audience? Nobody else? All right, we will move from we'll close the open session and we'll go to the business of the meeting. The first item is, this is a public hearing matter regarding the zone map amendment in Young Power Sports. We have a representative of Power Sports here, but we also have one of our staff here. So Corey, you want to come up and brief us about that?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As indicated, this is a petition to rezone a portion of property. Jennifer, our city recorder, if you pull up the map. Might be a little bit hard to see, but think of the South Frontage Road and Porter Lane and the Tri-City Power Sports building that is located there. The Power Sports building is only partially developed, that property. It creates that, I don't know what you'd call it, some type of flag shape running along the frontage road, where the flag is where the building is, and then the stem is running parallel with the frontage road. That was approved a long time ago, partially developed, and it's all one piece of property. The owner of the Tri-City has chosen to sell, and the Young Automotive Group is interested in taking over the Power Sports business and expanding it. The family also owned, you'll see a parallel piece of property to the frontage road right behind. If you visually look on the road, behind the open area where sometimes you saw the trailers of the Power Sports, but it was undeveloped. If you look behind there, you'll see the metal industrial buildings. There's currently a building where some of the skin of the steel frame is off of. That property runs parallel behind the vacant area. That was also owned by the same family that sold this Power Sports to Young. The difference is it's in two different zones. The back piece is a commercial high zone, In the front piece is a commercial very high zone. They've secured both properties and would like to combine the property into one development. In the commercial high and in the commercial very high, sales of power sports type vehicles is a conditional use in either zone. There's no access from the back property via public road. There is some private agreements that has provided access to those properties. Part of that is the property that shares that access is on the storage facility site. But they would like to combine it together and develop a power sports center using both properties. Looking at the general plan of the city, the idea is to move away from those industrial uses of the past, the long past, if you will. And the idea is to bring a commercial component to the frontage road, particularly with some retail type businesses, something more compatible in the commercial type of atmosphere rather than the industrial atmosphere. So that's why you see the zoning in place. It was reflecting in 2003 a change to do something less industrial and more commercial. The distance for commercial by the plan policy is a 500-foot distance, and so that falls with the linear CHP still is within that 500-foot distance, and then you'll have the storage sheds, which will separate from the residential area, so you still maintain. We don't have it by policy in this neighborhood, but if you're familiar with the Northwest, we want to step the zones, and we would still maintain that step zone appearance, even though it's not a policy. It would follow a common practice when we think about rezoning property. So from the standpoint, it was presented to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission evaluated it, and they also recommended approval of the change. So the recommendation from staff and the Planning Commission is to approve it.
Questions for Corey before we go to the applicant? Okay, the applicant is Young Automotive Group, and I believe we have a representative with them with us. Steve Peterson, how are you?
Good, very good.
Want to introduce yourself, anything in addition to what I said about you?
Yes, I'm Steve Peterson, architect working on this project with the Young Automotive Group and representing them for this change we're proposing.
Okay. Anything to add right now?
No, I just want to thank the council for taking the time to review this. Mr. Snyder and the Planning Commission have been great to work with, and yeah, just our intent is to, combine all these parcels into one piece of property, and we're trying to unify that zoning use. And just as it transitions to the east, I think it fits well within kind of what the overall goal is.
Thank you. Questions for Steve from council right now? If not, let's go. This was one of those matters that I said was a public hearing matter tonight, so let's go to the public hearing matter for the zone map amendment with Young Power Sports that was just discussed. Once again, you can call in if you're offline. We're just discussing this matter right now, Young Power Sports. So those that are here or that call in, that public hearing is now open. Once again, just identify yourself and where you're from. Always give it a few seconds in case there's online they're having trouble to get in. Seeing that there's no comments from the crowd here or that nobody's trying to get in, we will close that public hearing, and we will go back to, if at this point in time, to council if there's further questions of the applicant or of our staff.
So Corey, as I was out driving around this property, well, not on the property, but looking at it from different sides, it seems to me that part of it backs Shayla Park.
We go back to the map.
And so I'm a little concerned about changing the zoning to commercial very high, not necessarily because of this use, but because of what that would open it up for if someone else were to take over the property.
Sure, I can address those two factors. So Shayla Park, you'll see the loop street or the prominent L street just to the east of the red. The storage unit is the property, you see the big red piece of property, it creates an L shape around that, plus the entrance. That's still the storage shed property. I'll walk over with the pointer and just show you the property that's being rezoned. If you approve it. Here's your storage shed area, and this is the property, this linear building. So Shayla Park here, so you do have a distance. The question is it an adequate distance? Sorry, we're on YouTube. So the question is it an adequate distance? And that's essentially what you're inquiring of. Part of the answer to that would be what is the consequences of that? So you're changing intensity of the zone. A lot of the uses transfer from CH to CVH. Where a distinction can be easily made between the two different zones is the size of the buildings. So in the CH zone, the size of your building is limited to 50,000 square feet. And when you go to the CVH, you can go above 50,000 square feet. And so that would be a place that you could draw a line. I'm concerned about increasing that intensity and what will happen. Well, here's some competing interests that take place. One is let's just leave the property separate. Although we're not looking at the site plan, I've seen the proposal for the site plan and the amount of parking and the amount of landscaping. They are right at the edge of developing about an 84,000 square foot building. That's above that 50,000 square feet. So you could say, I don't want to do that because that's an 84,000 square feet building. Well, they could develop then independently and put 40,000 square feet on one site and 400 on the other site and still be under the horizon of both. And so they could get a conditional use permit for the back piece of property for the sales and just make sure that they build it as two different sites. And they just have cross access between them because they own both properties. The downside of that, even though that's possible, the downside of it is our zoning ordinance standards don't like developments to be split between different zones. They want to have clarity of which property rights you have and which property right you don't have based on the types of zoning. So that creates a potential where you're developing a site behind that has no access and then gets sold at some point in time and doesn't become a component of the front development. And now we're in a more problematic place because it's in a different zone, sold independently, and now there's going to be some work with the remaining part of the commercial high zone to create that access and reuse that piece of property. Where if we pull it into one ownership, develop it in its entirety, it's not likely there's going to be a future contention between types of uses and types of zones. So our zoning ordinance is uncomfortable with introducing that. So it is a balanced question. From my perspective, it's fairly low risk because you have a commercial high creating that buffer, and they still could independently develop it separate of each other, and both zones allow that particular use. So it's really, the uses become less of a concern in this change of zone. It's the size of the development that becomes the concern, and this is going to be limited by its size.
Well, and Jennifer, would you mind zooming out a little bit so that we can see? Yeah, I mean, the thing is too is that along this frontage road corridor, that's the pattern, right? It's commercial very high and then residential right next to it. So this one is actually more buffered than those other situations.
It is. I just know there are other uses in the commercial very high And once we've granted the very high designation, then they could use for other things.
Yeah, you're
that
absolutely correct.
might not be appropriate next to the.
A lot of the uses carry over. You end up increasing the size of the development with the CVH. That's your main difference. I don't want to say that there isn't some subtle uses into the changes, but that commercial high and commercial very high are closely knit. It's based now on how big of a building you could build. So you can, a Walmart versus, what am I trying to compare it to? The old garden center that's now the Renegade Sports. It's the size of the building intensity that I think is your greatest risk when you have a change of zone.
So there really isn't a lot higher intensity use that could come in on that. And that was my concern, was the use, not the size of the building. To begin with, I thought, well, why couldn't we just make them both commercial high, because it was allowed in commercial high.
Right.
But then I realized it was the size of the building is why they're wanting to go to commercial very high.
Yeah, the commercial high is intended to create shopping centers. And so that's your biggest difference in the uses, is trying to create shopping centers. And again, this one, you're combining a piece of property that does it above the 50,000 square feet. But like I said, looking at developing it of any building size, 15% landscaping. Again, we're calculating this on 4 stalls per 1,000 square feet, which is basically our highest parking standard. The max they're going to get just physically with the size of the property that you're adding to the rezone is 84,000 square feet.
But it wouldn't allow like a manufacturer or something to come in that was my concern, is what kind of a use would it allow that would be really incompatible?
They're pretty closely tight knit together. There's going to be some subtle changes, but they're close together.
Not a lot of difference in the uses,
Yeah,
okay.
To me, it's the intensity and size of your building allowance.
Okay.
Other questions? All right, if not, looking for a motion from a council member.
Very well.
I would be willing to make a motion to, just a half a second, I want to get the right verbiage, maybe. Approve the application for the commercial very high zoning for the property for Young Automotive Group as presented.
Second?
Motion and a second. Further discussion?
I was a little concerned, but since I'm assuming that this public notice was noticed in that area. Is that?
Corey's
The
nodding.
public hearing was noticed to them? Okay. So when I talked to Corey about it, he said that most of the impact on Shayla Park will be a change in the actual skin on the building, not necessarily the building itself. So I don't see anyone here from Shayla Park objecting, so that makes me feel better.
Further discussion? Thank you, Councilwoman Ivey. Let's take a vote. Councilman Ince?
Aye?
Aye.
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 That motion passes 4-0. Do we need anything on the ordinance? Lisa? Or is
Yeah,
that-
we're assuming that motion is approving ordinance 2021-23.
That's what I was looking for, and I couldn't
with the
find
findings
it.
set forth therein.
Yep.
I think it's sufficient.
Normally it's in the recommended action.
I understand.
But it
Maybe it
wasn't-
was there, but I couldn't find
Yeah,
it.
wasn't
It
your
wasn't,
fault.
it was down in the bottom.
Yes. Thank you. All right, let's go to item number 2. This is culinary, thank you, Mr. Peterson, for being with us. You're welcome to stay if you'd like. Item number 2, culinary waterline easement for the Stevens residents. Our city attorney, Lisa, do you want to give us some background on that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and City Council. Jeff and Joni Stevens would like to build a single-family home at 1167 North Main Street. As part of that construction, it's just a lot, not within a subdivision, and we need to obtain a culinary water line easement along the northern boundary line of that property. So
Staff's just recommending acceptance of the attached culinary water line easement for the Jeff and Joni Stevens residence.
Has the foundation been dug for that house?
Corey, you're being asked.
They have staked and I believe started to excavate for it, but that's as far as they can go.
Is that the right address? Isn't that the one I called you about, Corey?
This is right close.
So this is close to
Right
that,
next
but it would be
to-
on the west side of the road rather than the east side of the road.
This one's on the west
Right
side?
next to Jenny P. Stewart.
Oh, okay.
Oh, all right, okay. I was in the wrong spot.
You got it pictured now?
Got it now,
Just north?
yeah.
Yeah.
I move that we accept the culinary water line easement for Jeffrey and Joanne Stevens at 1167 North Main Street.
I'll second that.
Further discussion?
We don't need to have measurements on it for how far back, just how far from the property line, right? Because I didn't see any distance from the frontage
Well, how far
to the
back?
edge of to the end of the,
Yeah, I see that in the drawing. We can look into that. And
I'm
just have a
assuming that
distance
as
back.
long as we know it's the 15 feet from the property line.
Well, it is
That's
in
enough?
the legal description, so the legal description will tell you how far.
But
We
it
could
doesn't need to be
see
on the
if their
drawing.
engineer would put that distance, but it is in the legal description in the page before the diagram.
All right.
I think
Thank
it's,
you.
looks like 122 feet.
Any further discussion? Do a roll call vote. Councilman Ince?
Aye.
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 That motion passes unanimously, 4-0. Next item on our agenda is the 4th of July debrief. And as our 4th of July chairs come up to talk to us, I just want to kick this one off by stating that we hoped in this discussion that we will discuss the finances and the activity, what took place. We also have our police chief and our Parks and Rec department here to give their input as well too. We do have planned within the next couple of months a work session to talk about next year's festivities, what will be happening there. This is to discuss this year's festivities and what took place and get a report from our chairs. So our chairs, you want to introduce yourselves and give us your presentation. I know that you get in our packet, we have a lot of information as well.
Well, thank you. We are very excited to report back on the 2020-21's 4th of July celebrations. I've heard it be called even Centerville's city reunion because so many people gathered together and were able to see each other, and they haven't seen each other for so long. So that was really exciting. I just want to give a quick overview of my report tonight, let you know what I'm going to go over. First, go over just quickly just the events, event activities we did. Then I'd like to go over, second, I'd like to go over what, anything we did new, and then what went well. Then I'll go over and touch on what we didn't do, and maybe some improvements we can improve upon. And then fourth, go over budgets, and then, of course, ask any questions on budgets. And then fifth, go over any recommendations and answer any questions regarding recommendations. So just do a quick rundown of the events. We start off with a 5K Freedom Run, which was done by the Rotary Club. We were able to continue that tradition. Also, the Quilt and Art Show, we had moved across the church, across the way. The Children's Parade, the all-day event at the community park. We were able to have, people were greeted with over 445 American flags. We had 21 booths. We had chalk art. In the kids' corner, we have inflatables, rock walls, Home Depot Kids Club, mini pony carriage rides, bubbles, face painting, and 12 additional game booths. We also added bleachers for adults to watch the kids. In the northwest corner, we had laser tag and archery. And in the pavilion area, we added pinball and a story walk. We also had about 7 food trucks. We added a stage which had local talent throughout the day, and of course, Eclipse 6 was our final performance. And then we had a spectacular fireworks show. Just to go over just a little bit. Oh, yes, that's on there too. And we will be going over that. Yes, we had a first responders acknowledgement. I have braces, and so I have to deal with this with water, so forgive me because I have to keep this going. What went well and what was new? We did it at the Freedom Run was at the new location at the park, the community park. They had bagpipes playing that we were going around, he was playing. The runners, the feedback that I've heard regarding the runners, that it was positive. They liked the new run, and also the police said that was a great, what's the word I'm trying to use? Venue, but route. Thank you. And then we had it followed right after that. We had the children's parade. Can we pull up just really quick the children's parade?
I have it in 1 second.
She'll find it
I forgot
quick.
we had that. Sorry.
Jennifer's good, she'll have it.
Yep, we had the children's route, which was a new location, which many kids came down. We had more parking up there, more parking for drop-off. I was told we had more room to line up. There we go, it's kind of sideways, sorry about that. And then we invited, because we weren't able to have the larger parade, we wanted to still involve the community, so I reached out to Centerville Junior High and the Viewmont High School and asked the cheerleaders, the SBOs, if they would want to join and like bookend the event. So they did join us for that, and that is the parade route that they went. It was well attended. There was plenty of room for bikes and scooters for parking when they came to the end, for them to go get their popsicle, as we kept that tradition and wanting to get a popsicle. And the kids didn't feel rushed to leave to get the popsicle, and they were able to enjoy that. They went through about 13 boxes. Prices went up a little bit with that, but we did go through 13 boxes. We ordered 13 boxes, I apologize, and then at the end, we gave out like a one box, I think it was, to people. We had, like I said, 445 American flags throughout, and then there's patriotic banners that we've had in the past, and we were able to use those banners from the past parades that we were able to put around and make it feel more festive and patriotic. We had the Sign Gypsies come, where people utilize that all day long, from morning till evening, taking pictures in front of it and creating great memories and being able to take pictures with those. Let's see. We had 21 booths going down on the east corridor, and the feedback was from everybody, from our Parks Department to people attending. The sidewalk felt safer, it was wider, people were able to, the booths were spread out more so more people could be there and spread out and do that. Let's see, and then of course the handicapped access, as that person had called in earlier about that. I've had several people talk to me about that as well. The vendors themselves, their feedback was that they loved all the events in their booths just for one day and not for 2 days. They loved the all day, even though it was a long day. I thought maybe they wouldn't say that, but they did say that. The Parks Department, we added 20 electrical outlets that were installed, so we were able to plug into those and use those, which is wonderful.
The vendors sold out of their food?
Yeah, some vendors, they sold out. I was going to hit the next. Big hits also were, there was a booth that gave away free lemonade, which he was a dentist local dentist, and he was a hit because everyone loved the free lemonade. Another big hit was the cotton candy. I mean, all of them did so well, and they were very, very positive. The Kids Corner. The Kids Corner was also a wonderful hit. We did it on the far northwest corner. That's where the inflatables were. There was some power improvements on the west side, which saved us money for a generator. And we can plug those inflatables in and use those. With the inflatables, we kept 5 inflatables and then a rock wall. Then Home Depot Kids Club came and they were able to donate again as well, which everybody loved. We added a miniature pony carriage ride, which along the whole north pathway that people were able to ride the carriage, which that was super fun and different. That was the one thing in there that cost money, that they were charged per a small fee, but everything else in that area was free for our citizens. So I am very happy to say that. Bubbles were the bubble machine. There was this bubbles that kids ran through, huge hit. They donated the bubbles, we paid for the bubble at cost, and then they donated their time, which was awesome, and that was a huge, huge hit. In addition to that, and in the report, you have 12 additional, actually, it might even be 14, I looked, different booth activities that we had a volunteer help put on, which he did a lot of work on that. So face painting. As soon as there was a press release that went out, I had phone calls from outside of our city. And they were from face painters that wanted to come in. And I said, I would love to have face painters, because what does that look like? And what do you charge? And I can't, what does that look like? And they said, $6 to $15 a face. I'm like, okay, I'll get back to you. So got off the phone, I quickly called Viewmont High School. What a beautiful way to create an opportunity for the people in our citizens in our community and give back and provide an opportunity for them to fundraise. So they actually came, the Viewmont cheerleaders came and did face painting, and they just did it for tips. And so they were able to a fundraiser. The other thing we added over there in the kids' corner, we added bleachers. So parents could come, adults could come and watch the kids as they were freely able to run around. And the feedback has been, that was wonderful, because they didn't fear their kids getting lost, and they could see them, even if they're out in this 5-acre field, but they can watch them or be with them. But they enjoyed that, sitting in the shade, as it was very hot that day. And they love massive feedback with the fact that it was basically free for them to enjoy, and then still have money left over to go get food at the food booths or the food trucks. In our northeast park, northeast area, we had laser tag and archery tag, which was a hit. We had pint-sized Picasso come. They're a local store in Bountiful, but they came after COVID. They were hurting, and they came, and they just loved the opportunity to come, and they did a booth, which it was constantly busy. We added pinball machines, which were underneath the Bowery on the east side. We did not pay for those. Brian was able to contact, I was trying to be creative, and I said, hey, let's collaborate, let's have you come out and put your pinball machines out, and then let the people put their quarters or whatever in, and they were able to come. So that was a fun, different addition for people to have. We also had a story walk. The librarian put a story walk, which was fun, out in that area as well. And we had chalk art, which was very grateful for our, I went to the Bountiful Chalk Festival. I happened to be driving by to get a sign for the event, and saw that, and I started talking to some people. I saw Viewmont High School students. I said, would you guys like to participate? And they said, we would love to. So they were there drawing and doing their things. And we did have a few other people, local residents, that also did it. So to add some patriotic feel to it. We had 7 food trucks throughout the day, come and go. We had those. And then in my recommendations, I'm going to go over in a second, but anyway, so we had those. Okay, and then the Quilt and Art Show. We were able to keep the Quilt and Art Show, which I was super excited and happy to do, and that was at a new location, which was across the street, at the church across the street. Leslie Palmer and her volunteers helped set that up and did a wonderful, wonderful job. In 2019, they had 14 quilts, and then this year they had 21 quilts. The art, because she wanted to maybe promote the art. They didn't have as much art this year, which I'd love to have seen some more art, but I think with the time was really hard last minute to get it all together. But they did have some pieces, and she would love to put that out more next time and promote it and get with the schools and different things. The event went well. That a local sponsor came to us and said, I want to sponsor next year the quilt show. It was for the quilt show. I would love to have it been for fireworks. It was for the quilt show. Which is just awesome that they saw the vision and trying to grow and make it even more fun. But we're seeing people that enjoyed it and want to volunteer sponsoring it. Just to give an idea, I mean, we don't know an exact number of people that were there. I mean, coming in the morning, you have a crew of people leave and they come back. Just to give an idea, maybe it gives you an idea. When I asked the world's greatest corn dogs, how many corn dogs did you sell? And they said between 3 and 10 p.m., they sold 5,000 corn dogs. That's a lot of corn dogs. But anyways, so I thought that was pretty interesting. It was great. The police, Mike was able to put together a mass gathering contingency plan for the city, utilize that larger park and put an actual, just a plan together, a written plan that we can use for any event in the city and actually got that solidified and done. And I'm grateful for that. This is regarding police and safety. They also mentioned it was easier to manage at the larger park. They had 2 police officers on each side, had different, what's the word I'm trying to use?
Patrols?
Shifts.
Shifts?
Sorry, I'm thinking of a different word. Shifts that they were able to do. So 2 on each side, they were able to do that. And then they also used a drone, which was nice. They were able to see and see overhead, which was awesome. As far as I know, that I have heard, and they would need to confirm, I did not hear of any lost children, where I know before, in the past, we have in tight areas, but did you? I don't remember, or did we?
Just very briefly.
Briefly? Okay. Well, we did. We had a momentarily lost child. And then,
more of a lost parent than a child.
That's funny. So the other thing, we reduced this, or the police, they reduced the speed limit on frontage road to 25 miles an hour, so that made it safer. And then made sure that as people exited, they exit out north, so they were always turning right, going out of any parking lot for that matter, to keep everybody safe, which also went very well. There was, okay, and then the feedback from the police also, they liked it all in one day. Every officer, which I found this to be interesting, every officer, people were just coming up to them constantly and had been approached and said, thank you for having it at this park. This is so great. That's what I have down that they talked about. And they were approached, that it felt safer and they were pleased. Parks Department, their report back to me, it was easier to service the event. So to keep the bathrooms clean, the bathrooms were kept clean. It was awesome to have the ice machine at the park. They can constantly be filling, and right there by the concessions, we had water stations for free water with ice water that people could just constantly be using. Another positive. And they were able to right there fill ice and keep water constant for everybody. I don't think we ever didn't have water that was cold. And then the garbage cans. they were able to eat with ease and be out of people's way and travel and go pick up the garbage without having to step over people with garbage, and just, it was just much, much easier. And keep the carts out of the way. Parking. The parking that I'm receiving is, in regards to parking, it was just great by all. I didn't hear any complaints. I forgot we had this. Okay, what do we have over there? Just really quick, you just do the scan event, I guess. Do the QR code, I guess we have to go that. We were able to make this last minute, because we did have the maps, but then we made a QR code that people could snap with their phone and have the map with them wherever they went. So that was kind of nice. We also had support from fire that said that it went well. I talked to, before we started, I met with the fire marshal, and he said to me, I'm so happy to finally have it moved to a safe location. And then he smiled. He was pleased. Let's see. Did we already talk? Oh, say. Parking. I'm sorry, I think I went back. Parking stalls. I apologize. Hang on a second. We had a total of, just in the parking stalls, 907 parking. So that would be on both sides of the park, across the church across the street. The church just, can you maybe pull up number 1 of the map? Of the map. So just, there's the park, and you can see 963 feet just south of it which is about a 4-minute walk. Somebody has told me, or Google I should say, that there was 222 spots to park. I had feedback from someone that lives just across the street, and they said when they were walking, there was not very many people even parked up on their street, and as they walked to the park, there was only like maybe 10, I'll even add 5 for fun, kicks and giggles. She thinks around 10-ish cars that we've been parked in there, so there's still plenty of room to park. Let me just look real fast. So number 2, yeah, that's 2. So that right there, that's where all the parking was, just that 963 feet away. And then number 3, which is just across the street, has about 159 parking spots, which that was full, is my understanding, constantly. And then number 4, that was the parade route. So I don't have feedback if that was even used. If people weren't parking on the side streets, like I'm as far into it on some side streets, I don't know if people even actually end up using. I just don't have feedback on that. But that is about 300 feet closer than some of the other park where people did utilize. So in the event we need to, there's room to grow there if they needed, if people were aware they needed to. And then number 5, that is the parking stall there with 231 stalls. And then number 6 and 7, those are on each side. Actually, number 6, that is number 6. That was used for handicap parking. I felt very strongly that we needed handicap parking and to cut the whole thing off, except for food trucks. So we did. During the morning time, it wasn't as full, but it actually left it easier for the kids to come in and not have a bunch of cars there. But the feedback, I've had so many people thank me, just even again this last week. Someone said, thank you. My mom even showed up last minute, was able to get a parking spot, and she was concerned about that, and she is handicapped. So I feel like that was, I think it's a necessity that we provide that for our people. I know, Stephanie, at one point, we had talked, when you had mentioned maybe the feedback, you got feedback, I just hadn't received the feedback, but you had received feedback where maybe people felt it was too far away or whatnot.
It was the fireworks that were so popular, and so I had feedback from some people who felt like they were almost in Farmington by the time they found a parking spot.
So, okay, so that's good feedback, because I hadn't talked to you more about that, but I think with the solutions, 'cause I like looking for solutions, so that's great feedback, and I love that. So I think solutions would be to have, like we put out the map for the children's parade, maybe have a map of, possible options for people to park so they're aware. Hey, I know it was on our map or a flyer of the layout of the park, here's handicap parking, but really let people know that and how far away maybe the different areas. The other place that wasn't utilized, because that was like a 4-minute walk. I'm sure if people knew it wasn't full, they would have, and that was during the fireworks show, that it wasn't being used. So I think if people, maybe, that's just kind of my solution. And then also what was not utilized and could have been utilized, and we could promote that, is on the west side, across the street. They were allowed to park on there, like they do just for the 4th of July, like they do during football games and stuff like that. But that wasn't as utilized as it could be. So I would say that we let people know and communicate what would be my solution. We were able to add infrastructure to the east bathroom, even for future events, which allowed us to plug in for the stage, so we didn't have to get a generator and whatnot. So that made it, and to ensure that we had a party where it wouldn't go down. We had, let me just see something real fast. Regarding the stage, we had a stage which we had a large American flag in the back, which really set the stage for the event, and I think for the feel, and I think it was very patriotic, which I'm grateful for our fire department for providing and making sure that we got that, because there's a whole story behind that. I won't go into it, but if you want to know about it, that was just a little miracle by itself. But having the stage allowed us to have an event where thousands of people, that if they wanted to come to our event and celebrate together, could come. And if they chose to come, if they would choose to come, they could, if they wanted to, spread out, and they did. I have no way of knowing the exact numbers. I just, looking out, I'd have to start counting in the pictures, but there were a lot of people. We were able to have on the stage and utilize it throughout the day and have local talent. I think we could have even filled it up even more so. It just, we were throwing things together, trying to get as much as we can in a short amount of time. So it just took, but I think with what we did okay. We had, the entertainment was Eclipse 6. I feel like they were able to entertain kids of all ages, from young to old. People were up, they were dancing. We had glow-in-the-dark, a vendor come in, and they were selling glow-in-the-dark stuff, so people used their glow-in-the-dark stuff. When they sang Sweet Caroline and everyone was waving in the air, it was a very sweet memory for me, but it was very, very cool. And I think uniting as well as a city. We had a first responder appreciation, which we were able to show gratitude and sacrifice and give back baskets of gratitude to them, and we so do appreciate them, so thank you. Again, family feedback as well. People were able to even come even last minute and even still find a spot. I think some sat even behind the stage, maybe, and I don't know, maybe they thought they couldn't find a spot out in the sea, but if they had walked out there was still room. If you actually walked in there, there was where families laid their blankets out. Some had tables, and they were able to celebrate together. And then we ended with a spectacular fireworks show by Don Christensen. So those are some of the just a few, I'm sure, I feel like I'm missing things, but I added, just wanted to, those are the things I wanted to go over regarding what went well and what we kind of did different. Wanted to touch, of course, on the parade and the things that we didn't do, which is the parade and the breakfast. And both of those things all started with when we met with the health department, and they said no, and I'm like, okay, and then no to the breakfast. I said, what about breakfast? It's another tradition we need to keep. And he said, what does that look like? And then I told him, and he said, no. I said, what about food trucks? He said, yep, you're fine. I said, okay. So, and then regarding, we prefer the food trucks. Regarding the breakfast, I'm noticing it has declined in the years past, and the last time we did it, there was even, I think they lost a little bit of money, so that we just needed to move forward, and I felt confident. We had other things that we had planned that were going to just be fine. So the improvements. The feedback, I actually hope to have had, and we just didn't have the time to pull it off, but to have speakers on the so on the west side of the concession stand, so that more so for safety. Feedback from the police. Of course, they hear the boom boom, but they need to hear the voices if in an event there was an issue. So that was one feedback. Regarding food trucks, improvements would need to get good ones. The good ones get booked, and they're booking now for the 4th of July for next year, so that needs to be booked now to ensure that we get some good food trucks. We had 7 come and go. I would like to have seen more. The ones that were available were already in addition to what we already had, so we just stuck with what we had. The other, yes.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yes.
Do we guarantee a food truck any kind of revenue?
Not for the 4th, I said, then they're not the food truck for us.
Okay.
Sounds like they probably did fine.
And and now it's like, well, we want to go to your event. I mean, selling 5,000 corn dogs, and they were only starting there at 3. They were like, yes, we want to be there.
There's a danger of having too many food trucks, I thought,
Yeah.
100 of them out there.
Can you come up to the mic, because we have to record it?
Brett, if you're going to talk for a bit, we need you up at the mic so we can hear you too.
No, just,
Well, he's just saying that you don't want too many food trucks, but that wasn't our issue this year. It's because there weren't a lot available, and I was trying to pick ones that weren't the same, because then they don't want to come. But your question was, do we have to guarantee them money? And the answer is, some you do, but
So
for our event, we didn't.
if we get popular enough, can we charge them $100 to
Oh,
come?
good question.
Let me put it this way.
I don't know.
Down from my office in Salt Lake, there's Pioneer Park. And Thursday night, they do food trucks. And my wife and I stopped by there one time on a date, a month or two before the 4th of July. And they said an all-day event that those food trucks are thrilled to go to. That's why we don't have to pay for them to come, because a lot of time they're just going for an hour or 2-hour event, and they don't know how many people are coming. But for an all-day event with the whole city,
It doesn't cost you anything,
it's
which is great.
desirable.
I'm just asking questions.
Yeah, no, that's good. Good. I think it's a good question. The other thing I would say, some of these are improvements / recommendations, but I would say add a chair. A couple of these things I wanted to do, but I just only had so many hours and minutes in my day, and I could only talk so much. Which is I would love to see because we don't have a lot of photos, unless I'm reaching out to people, say, send me photos. Kids love taking pictures, but to have a chair that's over that, and they can get people that's throughout the day in all areas, and they're going around taking pictures. I would love to collect that. So that's something that I think would be fun to have and collect. Having a canopy in that park, we need some more shade, but I think it's doable with canopies, and I can envision what that would look like as well, and having a chair with that. Absolutely important and a must would be a volunteer chair. who I actually put one in place, and then they had backed out. So I just stepped in and had to do what we could do as fast as possible. I'm having a flag chair, because I think having those flags out, I've had many, many people I don't even know from different areas text me saying, even if, I think it might be in the report, I don't know, but just walking in, I took pictures with the flags, and that was just amazing. And we could turn around and leave for the day and still feel patriotic. So I think it was a nice addition. But having a chair over that, and then also having a trash and cleanup committee to quickly go in and help. I mean, it's a 30-acre park. Even if we use 25 acres of it, not leave that all to our Parks Department, who are so incredible and did such an amazing, amazing job in helping and pull things off. Recommendations, improvements also would be, the police have said, to do no parking on the west side. No, not on the west side. I'm sorry, yes, on the west side of 400 West, just in front of the park, which is just about 12 parking spots. So they can park about 900 feet that way, and they can park in the parking lot just down the way. But yeah, there's about 12 parking spots, just so there is it will help with congestion and safety of people crossing and stuff at the end of the night. And then the last improvement or whatnot is to make sure sprinklers do not go off that night for our fire department. So making sure that they're all ready to go for inspection the next morning. They went off that night, so we'll make sure that doesn't happen. So that's it for improvements. Going on to the budget. Forgive me, I need to pull up my budget.
You want her to pull that up?
You pull that up, just so I have it in front of me.
And you've done a
I don't know why
wonderful
I
job,
don't-
Kim. A lot of these
Sorry,
things
it's
on
so
this
long.
budget, you've described all these events, so
I
now
might-
we can
I might have
put
to
the
just,
dollar amounts to the event. But highlight for us there what you want to say about the budget.
I don't know, hang on, let me just, oh, here we go. So do you want me just to go down the list that you see, or what, how do you want, I don't know. I mean, our budget is $30,000. We spent $29,315.88. So we were under budget by $684.12. In addition to that, we had booth income of $1,000, so we did come under budget. And I guess I'll leave it open to questions unless you want me to go into particular about each of these. I'm not sure what kind of questions you might have.
Questions on budget items, council, or any of the events you did? While you're thinking about your questions, as I walked around the park, I got there early in the morning. I went and picked up a generator and dropped it by, and the Parks Department has done such a great job with electrical hookups, but it was nice to have the backup. And then I was there most of the day and went through the park. The only thing I really missed was the pinball machines. I saw them setting them up, and I was so disappointed because I wanted to put my Elton John star glasses on and sing Pinball Wizard like we used to do in high school with my buddies down at Trolley Squares on the weekends. You know, go play pinball down there at Trolley Squares. But other than that, I went home for about an hour to freshen up and come back. It was just an event that was fun to be at the whole day. But questions on any of the budget items or any of the events?
I think my question overall on the budget is, I know how hard you worked, and, well, I probably don't have a clue, but I have a sense for how hard you worked, and I have a sense for the amazing amount of volunteer hours overall that went into this, which that's what an event like this is all about. But I also want us to be realistic about making sure that people who are, they might be spending time out of their own life, but not money out of their own pocket. And so what of these areas do you think that to get the same kind of caliber of a situation and a celebration, to be realistic and fair to people, we would maybe need to increase? What are your recommendations for, To do what you did in a $30,000 budget, was that doable? Like,
Well-
is that repeatable?
With the fireworks and only use this and not ask for any donations or any, and not increase, no. Because the fireworks were 18,200.
So that would be the biggest bump in this
The
budget.
biggest bump.
That's what Councilman Fillmore's
Yeah,
asking,
yes.
you know?
Were there
And then
other-
regards to like Eclipse, everybody else is, or I guess we can go down the list, their fee went up a little bit. The music, the sound, if you compare it to last year, we also had a smaller park, or a bigger park. I thought, oh, we'll use the same system. They got there, go, well, you're gonna have more people, you can't.
Didn't it say that again?
Oh, I apologize. The speakers were increased compared to last year, because we're at a bigger event, a bigger park. But you would need to do that to get it to the thousands of people so the people in our city could hear it, right?
Okay. But we didn't, we
But it
paid
wouldn't
for
have
the-
to increase from
We paid for the speakers,
this.
or, I mean, could we not replicate that next year?
I apologize. Yes, you could, so it would be 4,500, is my understanding. Unless they go up, they would be
But I'm looking
45,
for
so I apologize.
particular Is areas that you think that the budget should be higher. So fireworks should be higher so that we're not requesting someone to contribute a large amount of money out of their own pocket.
Possibly the bubble machine, that was a huge hit. I would need to ask what that would be and get back to you.
So you think they cut us a deal too on the bubble
They
machine?
did.
Okay.
And then the archery tag, they also, in the laser tag, they did as well. To answer that question, I need to double check. He put $3,000 what it would cost, but I think it's a little bit less, because if he knows we're set in advance with a certain price, he will give us a lesser. So there's room for working through those numbers. So I don't think it would cost $3,000. I think it would be closer to the 2, but I would need to verify.
Is that he, the archery and
Yeah,
laser?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thanks.
And I would look into maybe not even do the archery. I don't know. That's where I would need to come together and maybe not do the archery. The archery was awesome, but it was so hot. You have to put a mask on. So I don't know. That's something we can discuss in the work session. So there's not an exact number, but I think that might be a close
So
one,
for the work
possibly.
session, you'll be there to answer our questions and
Oh,
give us
yes.
feedback on, like, setting a new budget.
Mhm.
And we can talk about, at that meeting, the possibilities of looking for sponsorships and things like that, which you kind of mentioned someone doing that sort of thing.
And then popsicles. Popsicles are 600. That went up from last year. We get them from Paces, and I heard they're going to be no longer. I don't know if that is the case, but I'm hearing that in Bountiful. So I don't know if that's going to be available. We would need to check on that. So, but there might be some other avenues I would like to explore. I mean, Farmington has those sandwiches, ice cream sandwiches, they give out for free, but they have them donated. I mean, I think there's things that we can do.
So these are
right?
things
But-
that we
but
could talk
this is-
about in a work session.
Sure,
So
but
you could
mainly
bring,
if you were to replicate, which I think is a great question, they are recommending an additional balloon light. And I don't have the exact number with me. How much is a balloon light? 53, 153? Do you remember? 200? Couple $100.
I was just
For
looking
additional
like,
light.
the really general.
Yes, but I mean, really, it's,
The fireworks was the biggest one. Okay.
and we can go over that later, but I'm just going to preference this. We will not ever be able to get $5,000 for fireworks. Those days are gone. When I called different fireworks company and they asked me what my budget was for fireworks, and I told them 5,000, there was a long pause, and I was quiet because I was going to stick to my 5,000. And then they said, well, looks like you're going to need to do some, generate some money and go get some fundraising. So, and we can again go over that in work session, but that number, the 5,000, is unrealistic, and I'm very grateful for Dawn for stepping forward.
so fabulous report. I do want to ask, we have our chief and our assistant chief here from our police and our fire department, and Bruce. Is there anything that Kim didn't touch
Well,
on that you wanted to touch
Just
on?
one more recommendation I was going to go over, and then if you're going to come up, just I have recommendations, which would be additional garbage cans. We needed, this was like the bad stuff, which I think is pretty awesome just to have these items. We needed additional garbage cans throughout, but you learn that as you go. A few more, maybe additional water stations. People loved them, but I think it would have been good to have a few more of those. More food trucks, continue the handicap parking. Police need about 50 more cones. That would be a request. And then, of course, everyone's talking about the community park, and we would discuss that at a future work session. But I think that's it. Oh, parking lot. So on the parking lot lights, the discussion of having, I don't know if they're wired or what the situation is there, but on that east side of the park, just in general, is very dark. So just having lights put in, which they're supposed to be there or whatnot, I don't know, I don't understand that part of it, but the recommendation is to get lights up on that side of that park.
Kim and Brian have made
For
good
safety.
notes. About the end of August, first part of September, Kim and I and Mike Dingman and Bruce met together. And so they've compiled notes as well, too, that will assist us in planning in future years. But do you want them to say anything? Did
Well, yeah,
they have anything to say, or?
I think I have it gone over.
Yeah, I think you've covered it quite well. As from the police department, we appreciate the recognition there for first responders, and I know fire department as well. And those corn dogs are really good. Yeah, so Sergeant Mike Deeman worked up an incident action plan on this. Of course, whenever something begins, you have to make adjustments. We needed a fair amount of resources. The size of the park did require us to have more officers there throughout the day, to keep 2 officers on the west side and 2 on the east side all throughout the day. The Rotary Club and the 5K, one of the biggest complaints that we heard from Rotary Club on that is that they couldn't hear when they were doing the registration because of the freeway noise. Apparently, next year, that wall will be, UDOT's putting in a wall there, sound wall, so hopefully that won't be an issue as much. There was also no power there at that pavilion, so that was an issue for the Rotary Club. Now, looking forward to next year, that may be changed depending on, how a run integrates with where the parade route is. The runners actually liked the route. The ones that I spoke to, they liked the route better down there, but they did miss the crowds kind of lined up on the road, saying hi as they run by down Main Street here, so there was that. We did have a problem with congestion there at Fourth West, right at the entrance to the park on the east side there, especially with the children's parade. So yeah, we do need to limit our parking along there. The lighting is an issue there on Fourth West. I think we've pretty well covered everything that I was going to hit. The handicap parking area worked out quite well with the food trucks there. The handicap parking wasn't utilized very much to begin with, but as the night went on, it filled up. So lots of positive comments that I received, and I know the other officers made positive comments about the location there at the larger park. So that's about all I've got. It did require more resources, though, for us because it's such a larger park. So it did require almost our entire department throughout the day there to do that.
Thanks, Chief. This is, you'll introduce yourself.
Dave Powers, Deputy Fire Chief, South Davis Metro Fire. So we experienced almost identical things to Chief Child, is that the size of the park required more resources. And given the fact that we're covering 2 other events at the same time, makes it a little bit difficult for us. So that's something that we have to consider. What you said about the fireworks is absolutely true. I couldn't believe what you guys got them for. That's amazing. I was the fire chief at South Ogden City for 7 years, and we were paying that back then for fireworks. So with inflation and everything else, I can't believe you got it for that. From the fireworks standpoint, it's a much safer environment for us in that aspect. And the park itself is a much greater access for emergency vehicles to get in and out. But one thing that I will tell you, and having a lot of experience in this type of thing at many different venues, I would anticipate that you're going to grow about twice as big next year. In watching what happened with North Salt Lake and their events that took place up at Eaglewood Golf Course, the people that are going to that event are from not just North Salt Lake, they're from around the entire community, and it gets very jam-packed in there, and people will hear about this and start looking at it as an alternative because it was a great venue. And so I think you need to anticipate that type of growth, which I think goes to the cost and getting vendors to help out with some of those costs.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. And Bruce, did you have anything?
Anything to add?
It went much smoother, and it was really nice having one day there.
All right, Kim, final thoughts? You've done a great report. Very, very thorough. Thank you. You and Brian did a wonderful job.
I just have so much gratitude in my heart for the opportunity that we had to do this event and the support we had, and the community, and for everyone reaching out afterwards. It was just not expected at all, and still get calls and texts, which fascinates me. So I am so, so grateful also for the city employees and all of their, just my last minute calls and calling them, and our parks department, the whole department was just phenomenal, phenomenal. Our police, phenomenal. Fired, all of them, phenomenal. All my chairs did a great job. I want to make a correction. I noticed just today, and I apologize, in the report that's shown, it shows at the end a list of people, and it shows, I just saw this today, I apologize, Louisa McDonald twice, and wonderful she is. The other person on there was supposed to be Bill Inns, so I apologize, Bill. We only, indeed, you shake your head, but guess what? I say this all the time, many hands make a light load, and we only had one meeting, so it's not like you missed out on anything. It was just, we had one meeting and I had to run, and it was then from that point forward, communicating with each of those groups or people, and so I want to personally thank you as well.
Thank you.
And just thanking everybody for that, so I'm just grateful.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So it was April 16th, the day after my busy season, and Kim and I met at the parks, and there was a very short time in getting this going because of the COVID, and we just needed to pull off an event that brought us back together and brought the community spirit back, and Kim and Brian and their committee and all of us that helped with that. But you, in a short period of time, the two of you worked really hard, and you deserve a big job.
Mayor, thank you for your diligence and commitment in seeing that to happen.
And all of you as well, too. Thank you. Makes me want to go do it tonight. Let's go. Let's go.
You need to start.
We're done.
It's supposed to rain. It's supposed to rain. Let's wait.
All right. Thanks so much again. Let's get to a huge item on this agenda tonight. They all are. But this is the public hearing related to the general obligation cemetery bond election. Now, what's going to be happening here, thanks, Chiefs, is that we will have we'll have some discussion on this, and then we're going to have a public hearing for people to ask questions about it, to give their opinions for or against about it. Then we'll have a statement read on the next item of our agenda as well, too. So we want to start off, though, with Marcus Keller from Zions Bank giving us a little background about bonds, and then we got an attorney, Aaron Wade, as well too, our bond counsel as well too, to talk about it. So, Marcus?
Okay. Let's leave this right here. If it's all right, Mayor, can I go ahead and invite Aaron Wade to come up too? There may be some questions that I'll actually lean on him for.
Sure, we'll let you get to it, the pulpit.
So just to give everyone a refresher, so this is part of the bonding requirement for general obligation bonds. It's part of the, to get it onto the election ballot and to make sure we are checking off all the boxes and going through that process. So the next step after this public meeting is if we do get any feedback or anything, then it'll help us as we prepare for a voter information pamphlet that'll be distributed to all of the residents, or actually I think it's all the registered voters of Centerville City. So I've talked to Brand about that. We're working on a draft right now, and we'll have the council review that before that is sent out in a mailer. But Aaron, anything else you'd like to add to that?
No. Nothing.
Okay, perfect.
Answer any questions.
Yeah, is there any questions from the council, either pertaining to next steps, the bond election, anything at this time?
Right now, do you have anything before we do public hearing?
Then I would like more time, if we could get more than a day and a half once we figure out what's going to go on the pamphlet that we.
Perfect, so we do have a
day
deadline.
and a half didn't work very well.
No, I understand. Well, we do have a October 17th deadline, so our goal is to get this distributed to the city council by this Friday. So that would be hopefully long enough, but we can do it quicker. But I will work with Brant to make sure we are getting that to you very quickly. And obviously this will be, a lot of it is boilerplate language as far as voting locations, polling locations. The ballot language is on there as well, but other information can be put on there as long as it is unbiased and factual. But it would be good, because I know some of the concerns is to make sure people understand the current capacity of the Centerville Cemetery. So that could definitely be put on there to make sure people are aware of what may be at stake, understanding what's available or what their options may be in the future. So. Perfect.
Any other questions right now? You guys are going to hang around, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Just sit back.
Anything with staff before I go to open this to a public hearing? Okay, so this is, and Jennifer, you'll pop up the number on the screen as well too. We want to make sure that we give this enough time that people that want to understand can understand. So here's on your screen, those of you that may be in Zoom to dial in on, and those of you that are here, come up to the pulpit, say who you are and where you're from, okay? And this is to discuss this general obligation bond, questions you might have about it, the feelings you might have about it, that type of thing. So the public hearing for the general obligation cemetery bond election is now open.
I came to this meeting to learn something about what you're trying to do in finding and buying property for a new cemetery. And will we get information like that as citizens of the city? How long it would take, how large a property you're looking for, so that we can have some idea about how long it would last as a cemetery for the citizens of Centerville, how far a distance you're looking at. Is it really worthwhile for the city to buy more property? These are the kinds of questions that I'd like to have answers to. And I thought that this is what we would learn tonight. That's why I came, so that we would have an idea how long it would take to fill another piece of property, how far away from Centerville it will be. There isn't anything in Centerville that I know of. And you've looked at this before, this possibility before. So I'm assuming that it will be somewhere else. And will we have an opportunity to ask, if I'm living in Centerville, the whole idea of having a cemetery is to be buried in the cemetery in the city. How do other people, have you talked to anybody about who hasn't bought a plot in Centerville at this point? Where would they be buried? Somewhere 50 miles away or 2 miles away or that kind of thing. I would ask if you could give us a little bit of information on that, it would be very helpful. If we're going to get the information that, well, it's from Zion's, will there be anything on it that, I know that you've been looking at this for a long time, so you must have a lot of information. And I think it's, by the way, I think that it's a wonderful way that you're doing it in a bond, and we would have to vote. You know, the citizens would vote for or against the bond, whoever won, that's it. So probably should have started that many years ago instead of now, but I guess if that's what everybody wants to do, at least you're doing it. And I think that that's good. I think that you're very careful about how you study the things that you're going to try to move, present to us as citizens of this city. So I don't know. Do you have anything that you can tell me tonight?
So, yes, we will. We will address that. I should have started this off by some background of what we've done as well, too. But we'll continue the public hearing, and if we don't get the questions answered, then I'll open the public hearing back up. But so we can give you some background on that as well, too. But it's I want to continue to get the public hearing questions. I've written them down and then respond. We'll see if there's.
Okay,
I don't know if there's going to be anybody else. So we'll
Yeah, my husband finally gave up and went home to get a phone, which has a lot of information that he got off of your website, and then he ended up here. He could have gone home a lot of time, but we had no idea when it was going to come.
Yeah,
so
just in following.
He'll probably be back any minute.
Following procedures, I want to get through the public hearing, then we'll have staff respond. I'll also have Bruce Cox come up and talk about the cemetery situation as it presently is as well, okay?
Okay, and
So-
will we eventually be sent out information? I had assumed that you probably would have that here, not understanding what exactly the public hearing was. So will we get
Right now in this
that
public hearing, we're
information?
trying to get your input and feel as well, too. Okay, so that's what we're doing through the public hearing. Ram, did you want to say something?
Stick around. We'll have a few answers for you before we're done. So,
But we do need your name.
And then I suppose by the time, I mean, the gentleman from the bank said that he would have his information out before election, enough time to think about it and talk with neighbors and stuff like that. So will it be written, you know?
Yes, it will be.
Printed-
There'll be all that.
printed
So
for
can you
us.
give, for the record, could you just state your name and where you're from? so
Oh,
we
I'm
have-
sorry. Mary Jo Tanner, and I live west of the old cemetery.
Okay, great. All right, thanks, Mary Jo. Let's see if we can get some of those answered. Any further comments for on the public hearing?
None online.
Anybody online? Okay, if not, I will close the public hearing related to the general obligation cemetery bond, and give you a little bit of background. This cemetery goes, running out of cemetery space goes beyond my time as well too. But we have a big packet that we put online that's available to the public. And there's lots in that packet. But one thing that we have tried to do numerous things in the time. We've met with the mortuary owner about doing a joint venture. We've met with Fruit Heights, Councilman Ince and I, about doing maybe a joint cemetery with them. We got from our map department 5+ acres in our city, and we approached people about potentially gifting or buying those acreage. We formed an exploratory cemetery group with a dozen or so residents, and a couple of council members were involved with that as well too. One idea from that concept was buying LDS church ball fields, because they're selling them up in some parts of the world, but they were not, we contacted the LDS church and they were not selling their ball fields here. Another idea was maybe getting some federal lands similar to what Fruit Heights had done for their property. One thing we ran into there is our federal land is up above where our land goes right now, and there's private property owners there, so we'd have to have all sorts of easements. These are some type of things that we have tried to do. Now, as far as this bond allows us to be able to potentially acquire land that we'll start looking for in 2022, and we would be searching within Centerville City is what we would be trying to do. We have a lead and some possibilities on some, but we don't have anything definite yet. Okay, but so that would be part of the process. Bruce, can you come up and tell us anything else about the existing cemetery and anything that and council, is there anything that I have missed that you did as well too that need to be brought up?
Did you close the public hearing?
I did close the public hearing, yeah. Is there anything before Bruce, or do you want to wait to hear Bruce first?
We can hear Bruce, then I've got a little bit to add.
Okay.
You know me, I've always got something to add.
Bruce Cox, I'm the current Parks and Recreation Director for Centerville City, and one of my responsibilities is the cemetery sexton for our current city cemetery. I can give you just some information about our cemetery. I've been the cemetery sexton for 19, 20 years now, and when I started, the cemetery is 7 acres. Our current city cemetery is 7 acres of land, and we did not have any restrictions on purchasing burial rights when I started here, and for many of the years that I worked here. As the number of right now, about half of the cemetery is full. All of the cemetery is sold. There are no available burial rights or spaces available for sale right now. As we started to get close to there not being we were down to the last few hundred spaces. The city looked at opening a section on the north side of the cemetery in which we had not planned to put spaces in, and after evaluating it and mapping it out and seeing the benefit it could add to our perpetual care fund, we decided to go ahead and open that section up for burial rights. And we also did an experiment on 5 rows, which we did a double depth burial section, where we doubled the perpetual care. All of the spaces doubled the perpetual care fees of what had been previously charged on the old spaces, and then the double depth actually got an additional, so you got triple the perpetual care fees on those spaces. Those spaces, they did, at that time, we put restrictions on how many burial rights a resident could or a person could purchase. It's always been allowed for residents and non-residents, and at that time, we continued to allow residents, non-residents. We had a non-resident fee and a resident fee. And it took about 7 years to sell, and the restriction was no more than 4 burial rights per household. And it took about, at that rate, it took about 7 years to sell out. I think we had roughly 500 new spaces that we added to the cemetery with that north plot. As we got down to the last of the burial rights, the city council decided to follow suit of our neighboring city cemeteries, where we decided to only allow purchase of burial rights at time of need and only by Centerville residents. And that significantly slowed down the sale. And in the last few years in which we had spaces available, I think it was, I'd have to double check for exact numbers, but it was around a dozen, 10 to 12 spaces a year is what we were selling of at time of need to residents only. So that might give you an idea, if you continue to keep that policy, of the rates at which you would need burial spaces. I know that there are a few different possibilities in Centerville. I know of 4 or 5 that could be between 4 to 10 acres of space that could, at that current policy of time of need and residents only, could last you quite a while. But if you're looking to recoup your investment more quickly, and you loosen up those restrictions, that would shorten the amount of time before you sold out your spaces. Right now, the cemetery is currently adding a cremation garden. Over the years I've been here, cremations have been consistently gaining popularity, and we have installed our first niche wall that will be available for sale by the end of this year. And we have designed plans that if that is successful, to put in additional niche walls. And we also are considering a veterans niche wall that would be for veterans and their spouses. So those are a few things that we would still have something to offer coming towards the end of this year in niches. But as far as burial rights, we won't have anything. We don't have anything available at this time, and other than those who have burial rights that have not used it and they might sell back to the city, there's none available or won't be any available other than that situation that I see. Does that help with any questions? Is there any? I might add that about half of the cemetery is full, occupied, I should say, and about half is. So we still have several thousand graves to dig, but they are all sold. So we will still be in the cemetery business for some time before we fill up our cemetery, but there is nothing available to sell.
Thanks, Bruce. Kevin, do we need to know anything from an engineering standpoint?
Kevin Campbell, city engineer. Brent wanted me to be here tonight. He wanted me to mention that there were some different hillside properties that were studied. The maintenance of those hillside properties is a little bit more extreme and costly. It's also more costly to run infrastructure to some of those properties. So that's another thing that was looked at, was the city owns some property up on the hill. So that's all I'm here to mention, if there's any questions about that at any time. So thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Bruce.
Just looking forward, if this bond is to pass and the city does move forward with a second cemetery, there will be some additional ongoing costs of that. In addition to purchasing land and developing a cemetery, we will probably start looking more like Bountiful City that has a cemetery department. We'll be creating a new division or a new department that will require 2 to 3 full-time employees, new equipment, additional seasonal employees to facilitate the operations of a cemetery. That would be ongoing costs that we need to consider other than just initial costs.
Thanks. Marcus or Nate, can you do a brief summary for us on how a general obligation bond works?
Mayor, there were a few other things that we considered before we jumped to the...
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
We did study doing down on the west end of the cemetery, filling in and burying from, starting at the south and working our way north and elevating the land as we filled that in. And we also considered going into underneath the road on 7th East. So we've kind of exhausted all of the options around there.
Did you have something right now, or?
I can talk whenever you want me to. I have a lot to say, so you just decide when you want to hear it.
Well, and I also just have questions about, to this citizen's point. I know we're limited in the information that we can get out, but it is important to be able to tell the entire story of the process of, like, for instance, in this packet tonight, that financial summary, right? That we're asking for bonding, but recognizing that the city would recoup those costs. And that, I'd like to gain a better understanding tonight of what our legal ability is to tell the full story.
Okay, would you like, the financial summary was done back in August. Do you want that reported again?
I would love to have an open
I'm talking about to the
house.
public, though.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So throughout the process, where and when are our opportunities to tell? I know that on the ballot, it has to be very limited and rigid in how it's presented, but what are our other opportunities to tell the full story?
If I can chime in, Mr. Mayor, and interject, I do hope, Councilmember Fillmore, this meeting is essentially that. We've had quite a number of meetings discussing the cemetery. We've done a lot of work behind the scenes. So my hope is that if there are any questions regarding the cemetery and the ballot initiative, this is essentially that open house, that hearing that we can point to the October 5th meeting. And every document we can think of is attached to Novus for review, as well as this discussion tonight. So it's easy to point to the October 5th YouTube and the documents attached instead of asking a resident to go to 7 or 8 different meetings where we've discussed this issue. So anything that we could throw out there, this is the opportunity for council to share your positions as well and how you feel. You're not necessarily limited in sharing your position on the dais. We're just limited. This is the opportunity for the pro and the for and the against arguments to be discussed in open forum. This is that opportunity for all sides to come forward and discuss those items.
So we don't get an open house.
This essentially is that open house.
No, this
to
is an
have those
open house.
conversations.
This is a public hearing.
Sure,
But an
but gives
open
that
house is when
opportunity.
people can come in and in an informal setting, ask their questions, look at the pictures, walk around, talk to people, and understand better. And
I
feel
will.
like that should come before a public hearing, so that people actually know what they're talking about and can express a view.
And I'll defer to Marcus to respond to that question.
So if the city elects, they can definitely do, prior to their next city council meeting, or set up a time, publish notice to try to gain more of an audience, to invite people to come and ask additional questions. Brant is right that this really kind of is the time. We did notice, we did, notices as required by law to let people know what the intent, what the project is, what the desire, the amount of money to borrow, the tax impacts that will all be in the ballot language as well. But I think getting to both of your points, though, too, one of the biggest things that's going to be coming up is this voter information pamphlet that will go to her point as well, that will describe, I think, the story that you want to tell, that will describe, obviously, the current capacity at the cemetery. That will hopefully be an aha moment for people to understand, if I vote for this, then this may be an opportunity for me and my family to be buried here in Centerville. If I don't vote for it, then more than likely, there may not be an opportunity for us to be buried here. So that's where we can really clarify. That will go out to all the registered voters. The city can even elect to send it to all residents of the city. I believe we'll work with the elections officials to make sure that gets emailed, or I apologize, mailed out correctly. And so that's something that we're crafting right now for you to review, to make sure it is stated accurately. Again, if the city council decides that they want to go above and beyond, I don't think there's any restrictions, Aaron, to them having an open house or putting that into another meeting to invite people after the voter information pamphlet is sent out to come and ask additional questions similar to this public meeting now. So I would encourage it if it's something that you feel strongly about, particularly if there's, school districts will do this if there's lots of false information that's going around about the project. If people, are kind of doing that, if you have a very antagonistic group against it, or if people are lots of people are just coming to you asking you questions, you could invite them to this open house. So that's definitely the city council's decision.
No, I think the voter information pamphlet is the key thing, and
Yep.
I guess I'm just not clear on if there are word limits, and I personally, my feeling on this is I don't have any personal stake in whether or not this passes. That our intent was truly just to find out if the majority of our citizens want us to do this. But I think one of the things that they don't understand right now is the financial analysis. And so, when and where are we going to be deciding what is included in that story that's being told?
Absolutely. So what we know to this point that's included is that the bonds would be authorized up to the $7 million up to the 26-year term. Now, that's to a not to exceed amount. Obviously, if you go out there over the next year and you find land that's cheaper, if you find an area that's just less expensive, or once we go to issue the bonds, if it passes and we want to structure it a little bit differently, obviously that can be within our purview. But that's kind of the parameters that we've set at this point based on this bond election. And then those accompanying tax impacts we'll also put into the voter information pamphlet. They're in the ballot language, but as we send over some drafts and some samples for you to look at, you'll see that there's some ways that you can go in and describe it. There may be some additional language that the city council wants to think about that says, since our residents are paying a fee above and beyond what somebody outside Centerville may be paying for this cemetery, we're going to make sure that that person, a non-resident, since they don't have to pay the Centerville city property tax, is going to recoup that cost. And that could be go to downsize the bonds, to pay them off early. Again, those are things we can discuss in the planning thing, but I would strongly encourage you to make sure that that's at least thought through when you're looking at this, because a Centerville city resident that's paying a property tax, so they're paying an additional fee to that cemetery, should be receiving a lower rate than somebody outside Centerville. And so
that's already been mentioned by Bruce. I mean, that's already in the ordinances.
Perfect. And so I would make sure that's very clearly stated in the voter information pamphlet as well.
So who's writing the voter information? Exactly. I thought you were writing it.
So we're going to send it out to you to review and add additional language, but we'll probably put in comments that say, please include, maybe what the different levels of payment, or that a resident will know that a non-resident is paying more. So we'll give you that opportunity to put that in there as well.
I think the most important thing that I'm pointing out is the financial analysis of what the cost of the number of acres would be versus what the revenue of the number of acres. I think that when we put out a bond for $7 million, people think we're spending $7 million as if it were on a park, that then just cost in perpetuity versus as soon as we build this, then it starts getting revenue, which will then eventually pay for itself and even increase what we paid for it. And so that part of the story, which I just haven't really heard as part of the conversation, is a key.
And we can put that under the plan of financing section. So there's lots of sections in there that we can break out so that you can clearly state. Now, I think some of the reasons we've been a little bit hesitant to this point to send out a voter information pamphlet is obviously we wanted to hear comments back from the public today, so we can make sure we're addressing all the concerns to send that over to you and say, these questions should be answered because it seems to be a concern. But also, too, the second thing is I think what's a little bit unique about this project compared to a lot of other general obligation bonds we worked with is they already have the land picked out. They already have engineers' estimate. This is a little bit more of a moving target where we're saying, give us permission to spend up to $7 million, and we'll try our best to be, spend less. We'll try our best to do, find a property that fits, but the acreage may not be known yet. We're still working, trying to, so there's a few moving parts in there where we can't just point and say, here's where it's going to be, here's how much it's going to cost, here's how many plots are going to be, where we could really describe that a little bit more clear. So this is a little bit more of the voters saying, have faith in us that if you give us this, we're going to spend it properly to find a cemetery that's going to fit the needs of Centerville City. And the hope is that as we sell these plots, that the bond will eventually pay for itself through these revenues. So that's kind of the story.
I'd like to hear from the council too, their thoughts on if they feel it would be appropriate to include the idea that there are two ways to go about selling the plots as well. So like if we wanted to get back the money that we spent quickly, we could just open it up for open sale and they'd go quickly and we'd get that money back quickly. Or we could continue with the policy that we have now, which is at time of need. And then to answer this citizen's question, if we continue with the policy we have now at time of need, this space would last us, you know, for so many years, decades probably, right? So
absolutely, and that would
that's
be
an important part of the story as well, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm a little frustrated because I'm feeling more like I'm sitting in those chairs down there today instead of up here. I do feel like we should have had an open house. I made several phone calls today and not one person knew about this meeting tonight. So we have one couple here, no one even online. So I don't think the city, all of us have to take the responsibility. We did not get this information out to the city. Now, what's going to come out on the ballot, what's going to come out in the voter pamphlet is not necessarily the questions that Mary Jo has and the questions that I would have if I was sitting in that chair. So to some of your questions, yes, we would like to find property in the city. You would be surprised. There are several areas in the city that we could get 5 or more acres in one area. And I don't think people realize that. I would like an open house where people could come in. I'm like Tammy, I'm like Stephanie. I'm not so worried about how this ballot is going to come out, except my fear is, because being on the council for 6 years, this is probably one of my most asked questions. And I think the mayor said several times when he was running and going door to door, the cemetery was one of the biggest issues in our city. And so I'm afraid in January, it's not going to have passed and people are going to say, we didn't understand. We didn't even know what we were voting for. And so then we've still failed them. I don't know whether it'll pass. But I want to know what the citizens want. But they can't know what they want if we don't give them the information. And I think what Mary Jo is asking is, yes, we are looking in Centerville City. Yes, we are looking for somewhere around 5 acres of property. How long will it last? Well, it was like Tammy just said. It will depend on what we do. We could take the first acre and we could sell it to whomever as fast as we wanted to get enough money to, build's not the right word, but to make the cemetery. So we would have that financial aid to start it or to pay back on our bond faster. Or we can, if we continue doing like we're doing now and it's only a time of need, my gosh, this would last hundreds of years because...
No.
Well, if he's
Not hundreds
only
of years, Robin.
But he's only selling 12 a year as of need.
How long has the current one been there?
Yeah, the current one's been there way over 100 years. Now, there wasn't as many residents.
Maybe 100, you're not hundreds.
Okay, but it will be there. Okay, I'll take that back. They're a very long time. So I would like to have an open house where people could come. We have been instructed that we're not supposed to be for or against, and I'm really not. I want what the people want. But I have had people contact me who have lost a son, who have lost a baby, who have lost a spouse, and they've lived here for 90 years and they can't bury their spouse here. And it's at a time of crisis, especially if it's an unexpected death. They have absolutely no idea that there's not a spot in our cemetery. And they come here to the city and we're like, sorry, I don't know where you're going to bury him. And we've just added to that grief untold. So for that reason, I want to give people the opportunity to have a cemetery here in Centerville if that's what the majority wants. But how do they know what they want if we don't answer those questions that you've asked? How many acres? Are there that many acres available in Centerville? Yes, there are that many acres in Centerville, but we can't tell you, oh, we're looking at this one and we're looking at that one. We'd have developers outbidding us in a second. We need to have the money in our pocket so we can go to somebody and say, you've got 5 acres. We can give you fair market value for those 5 acres. We have the money. Before that, we didn't have the money. I was personally against going to Fruit Heights for the same reason. These people that come, they want their family buried here in Centerville. And that's why I think people would be willing to pay more property tax to get the cemetery. But will the cemetery cost us? We could actually make money, or we could actually break even, depending on what we charge for plots. I've had people say, hey, I'd rather pay double for the plot and at least have the opportunity to be buried here in Centerville. So I think financially, but that's something, it's not, I mean, this voter pamphlet can't and won't address all of those questions. But if we had just a walk around where people could come in and ask the questions that you've asked, you know, have you got any property here in Centerville we could maybe get? Yes, we do. Could we get it? We don't know. But once we have money in our pocket, then we'll go out and try. How long will it be till you have a cemetery? Well, hopefully, we're going to start looking right after the first of the year, so hopefully it wouldn't be a really long time out. And obviously, it's going to take a while. We could develop, if we got 5 acres, we could just develop 1 acre at a time so that, you know, we don't have to develop 5 acres, so we could get it going faster for people. I'm trying to think of some of your other questions.
What I've heard that in the past, they offered the plots for like $35 a piece.
Right.
And a lot of people bought those, and you did all of that research several years ago to see if you could locate those people and ask them if the city could buy them back.
That's right.
And you had no one did
Right,
they?
right, right.
Yeah, no one did.
We actually did have a few.
Very careful about how you do this, you know, like if you have 5 acres, it may not be a good idea to sell the first acre, you know, and get the money to pay for it if they aren't in the city now.
Right, right. And so those are all the things that we need to look at, and all the things that I would love to have residents come here and talk to about and get their opinions on, and let them know that there's a lot of options if this passes on the ballot, then we have options of, and depending on where the land is, maybe we can do double depth graves, and so we can get twice as much out of 5 acres. Maybe only part of the land would be possible for that. So like, right, yeah, you could put people on top of each other, you know what I'm saying?
So anyway, back to asking questions about procedure, though, could we put the voter information pamphlet out first to tell that basic story and generate the awareness? And is it possible in the same mailing of the voter information pamphlet to advertise an open house?
Excellent question.
Because to actually have it come into your mailbox and then you know about, oh, when I read about this, but I still want to talk to someone about it and give my input. I don't know if legally that's possible, but.
Can we put an open house invite in as part of the?
Yeah, I think that, in front of the mic here. I think that we can. You know, there's obviously certain requirements that you have to include. The voter information pamphlet shall include, you know, the $7 million, the term, and some of those things. But I think that it'd be permissive to also include the timing of the open house. Obviously, as we stated, you know, tonight's the statutory requirement for a public hearing, but there's not a statutory prohibition on having additional input or, you know, giving people additional opportunities to learn about that.
So I think that would be a great approach, and it would be a tight time frame considering it's a mail.
The ballot
Ballots
comes
are out
next
in 2 weeks.
And they come
Yeah, we've
next
got
week.
2 weeks till the ballots come out. And so we are on a pretty tight schedule.
So the schedule, Marcus, you said was getting us something by Friday. The mailing is the 17th, is that?
That's the deadline for the mailing, so we need to make sure we hit that. We can obviously send it sooner, so we can kind of work, put it into overdrive, get it to you, get comments, get it as clean and precise as we want, put in the timing.
Overdrive.
There we
Yes.
go, overdrive.
Yes, because the ballots are being mailed out on the 12th.
Correct.
So we're already,
So let's go ahead and we'll
The
get what
ballots
you.
are coming out on the 12th, and
They're
we don't
mailing
even
on the
have to
12th.
send this out until the 17th?
I believe that's the.
That's the statutory requirement.
Because even though the ballots are going out, the actual vote date, I believe, isn't until later on. And so we know a lot of people do vote by mail, and that may be the only option.
That's our
it is
only
the only
option.
option, but as
this
soon as
year.
you're holding your ballot, you can turn it in. And
Correct. And
so we've missed that window of opportunity for those voters that vote as soon as they get the ballot.
But
So you have a lot of eyes. I mean, I would rather you crunch and get us like a rough draft as soon as possible, because this is a council that's very interested in this issue. We've been working on this for years. We'd be able to give you the feedback you need with the multiple eyes, rather than taking more time on your end. Get it to us quicker. We can get you edits, suggested edits. And then we can get it ready to go and out.
And have a,
Yeah, if there were any,
have an
if there were
open
any
house
way
as
that
soon
by
as possible.
Friday, we could be mailing something.
I will get you a template
Tomorrow?
Thursday. Let me do some edits to it. Let me clean it up. I'll get you a template Thursday, and let's just go full steam ahead and see if we can't get something put together. One thing to keep in mind that the city will want to prepare for is printing this, as well as working with the county to get a list of addresses for either registered voters, or you could just do, if you do have it ready to go, a list, just a mailer of all residents, even though some may not be voting. It may just be more of a.
It's a significant enough issue for some people that it might cause them to register and vote.
That's true. And we could do, I mean, if they're mailed out, if we do a every door direct, may be cheaper than just sending them out to the registered voters.
$1,000 instead of with a newsletter.
That's right.
6,500 prints. And then it's about $1,000 to send out.
So that may be cheaper for us doing that than it would be to try to mail out to individual addresses.
Yeah.
And so we could, like Councilman Ince says, I think this is an issue that people may come out and vote for, that they don't really care who's sitting up here, but they care where they're going to be buried. So I think it will get more voters out. I really want to get this information out to them.
And either one fulfills the requirement, so whether it's a list of registered voters, or just, if you have it ready to go, to just send it out, and if that makes it quicker, then
It's quicker
every
and
resident
more
gets it.
affordable, actually.
Yeah.
And I think people need to know that 7,000 is the ceiling. I mean, maybe we can find property for.
7 million.
Or 7 million, yeah, 7,000.
really nice.
Ceiling, no problem. So we could, we might be able to do it for 4 or 5 or 6. And so I want that information out to them to know that there's a ton of options. Just give us the chance, if you want a cemetery, to work with all these numbers and see what we can do with them.
And is your next city council meeting in 2 weeks?
Yes.
We'll do a city council meeting. I believe as a member that we will do an extra city council meeting if it takes that to get it done next week.
We'll meet anytime you need us to.
Well, I was just gonna say, depending on when we can mail it, if we can get it out soon enough, we could just have you do, maybe plan an open house an hour prior to the city council meeting starting, and then we can go ahead and just kind of line that up. But we want to make sure, obviously, the voter information pamphlets are getting to people in enough time so they could know what the dates are. So if it's in 2 weeks, then that will overdrive. We'll make sure it gets to their mail by then.
And Mary Jo, if you have any questions we didn't answer, feel free to contact me during the week, and I'll try and get you as many answers as I can. I appreciate you and your husband being here more than you know. I'm so sad that there aren't more people here, because this is an issue that's touched a lot of people's hearts, and I really feel like somehow we've missed the boat, or we would have more people here.
We feel like there have been some really bad decisions made, and not only that they were bad, they weren't done by the
But
Right, but they weren't done by this
One
council.
or two people that made that decision.
Right, right.
And we don't want that to happen again.
No,
because it's
we want
really
information
destroyed all
from a lot of
chances
people. Okay.
of doing something with the cemetery.
We'll get that out by Thursday.
Thanks, sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. So we'll work with Lisa and everyone to.
Can we make to them
No
a
pressure,
commitment
Lisa.
that they will have it back?
Could I make one comment? You said something a little while.
Come up here to the mic or take the mic down to him.
You said something a moment ago that I think is important to include, and that is that one of the reasons why you need to have this bond passed is so that you've got that pre-approved line of credit you've got the money in hand so that you can go out and negotiate seriously and get the best deal for the city. And I think it's important to say that because if it comes across like, okay, vote a $7 million bond and just trust us, we'll get it done right.
Right.
You know, I think you need to back that up with some substance as to the reasons, because when you said that, it did touch me that, yeah, I can see the reasons why that might be important to do that. I think this is such a significant issue. We talked about it. I mean, over the years, there have been discussions. What obligation does the city really have to provide burial? And I mean, if somebody has to go somewhere else, they have to do that. But I think that you've hit on some points, and the council members have had contact in the past with people who really, in a moment of need and urgency, have sought to have that access and been denied. And I think that there is a genuine need that is underneath that. And if there is a way to make the finances work out, you know, if everybody paid twice as much as the going rate, just so they could be buried in Centerville, that would switch the economics of it a whole bunch.
That's right.
So, you know, I think that I love your idea of an open house, and I think that getting more of that information is out there. But I've heard some good things tonight, and I hope it's a tight time schedule. I hope you can pull it together.
And it's important to note that not only does it give us that money to be able to find a spot, but legally, this is a general obligation bond for cemeteries. That's what we have to use the money for. We can't go and use it for something else.
Right.
So.
Well,
Okay.
the solution needs to be a long enough term solution that we don't come back in 10 years and have to fight the same battle again.
Yeah, because in
mean,
10 years, there won't be any land left.
Yeah, it needs to be a good solution. Thank you.
All right, council, any, what Marcus got
I'll
there?
agree with Bill. I'm willing to.
I think that we need to make a commitment that they will have our answers back on Friday, so that we're looking at doing something Monday.
You can come up.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
if I can interject, Marcus and I did discuss, as we did with the argument of even just having a few council members early on. I'm okay with this idea of the Thursday, but we did mention the idea of getting a small group together again to make sure this gets done by Friday. So if that's another option we can throw out there. Yes, so whatever direction you want to go with that, with this information, new information, and the conversation with Marcus, I think an open house just being available, and we can advertise it on social media. In fact, Bryce and I were just discussing that idea of advertising the open house on social media and creating that day. So we just need to schedule that time. But anyway, whatever direction council would like to go, this is great. We just want to make sure we're available and we're addressing as many questions as possible. But I really still like this idea of making sure as much information as possible on this forum with a YouTube video The open house isn't going to be recorded in any way, so I would like to still point to one particular meeting for all the documentation and a video for the discussion, and an open house to address those very specific questions.
Yeah. Brent, I have a question for you. The idea of having the open house just before a city council meeting next time, do we have a work session scheduled, and if so, can we change it?
This could be it. We don't have anything, do we, Brent?
We have a number of items we'd eventually like to discuss, but this would take priority for sure. If you want to wait for 2 weeks, I don't see any issue with even trying to schedule one Tuesday. Now, I mean, there isn't necessarily any requirements, Marcus, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is something we can just hit heavy on social media and try and even schedule it next week. But I think the voter information pamphlet is first the priority, and that will kind of dictate where we go from there.
I think if we get the voter information pamphlet out
To people first.
by Tuesday-ish, then
Sure.
people know when their ballots come in. Maybe I'll hold off if I want to understand the cemetery issue more in depth, then they at least know there's an open house coming up.
Yeah, I'd like it to go out with the pamphlet, because I think we'll get way more people.
I think so.
And I'd like to work with Marcus to see, again, this is the tricky area that I need some guidance from Gilmore Bell or Zions, and that is creating potentially an FAQ with Bryce of just getting the information out there. I believe if we make a web page with documentation, so, in theory, support of a cemetery, that we need to make that available for any arguments against. But there could be a web page created pretty quickly just for information. That's anyway.
I think we need
that-
more
that's
than a
another
web
option.
page. I like the idea of it going out on the voter, because you get that, and then it's like, I want information to know how to vote. So I love your idea of it coming out on the voter pamphlet. Attend this open house if you need more information. And hopefully then people will hold off voting until the open house, because they're going to want more information.
Marcus, can you, in a minute, we're going to have Jennifer read an argument for, okay? And things have been going out about this, and there was no argument against, and other information. For the public, where does this information go out to that's been going out to?
So the argument for information, or just the notices that we're sending out about the bond?
Yeah,
election?
is there anything that you're doing outside of what the city does in informing people about this?
So typically, we don't do anything above and beyond just kind of what's required by statute and legal law, but I think kind of I believe it was the prior meeting, or maybe it was a couple meetings prior, I believe I'd kind of talked to the city council that there's no limits to what individual city council members can do. So if there's certain organizations, certain clubs, whatever it may be, that you want to go and have some time to present to them as a city council member, because I know the comment was said earlier that the city council shouldn't be for or against. Well, actually, the city council is by default for the bond. That was made when you voted for the bond to move forward with the election. So if you want to go and reach out as individual city council members or in a joint effort, you can go speak to the bond, why the city needs it, why it's important, why the city council voted for it, what steps you're taking to make sure that the money, if it is given to the city council, is spent prudently, wisely, and why, as it was discussed earlier, why it's needed, that you can't go and offer on a property if you don't have any money to back up that offer.
So can I put something like that on my Facebook page?
Oh, would there be any limit to social media address? I don't think.
But I think as a, as
You'd better be at the mic.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, and so your question is, can you put the information, the argument for on your Facebook page, or additional information on your
I'm more
personal
about
Facebook
information,
page?
just about kind of what we've talked about. It could be more, that's the most it could be, but it could be less. The reason that we voted for it is because we've seen people in tragic situations. I mean, things like that.
Yeah, I think where it's not coming officially as the city saying, as an individual, I don't think that there's a limitation, at least within the, the Bond Act or the Transparency of Ballot Act from you doing that on an individual basis.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. So, as we prepare for this open house, you let me know a date. We'll stick that into the voter information pamphlet. We obviously don't want to get you as city council members in trouble too, so I would definitely lean on Lisa to make sure if you are gathering as more than one individual to speak on it, make sure there's no rules or issues in that regard. But I think this is a great way to do it, and I apologize. I think the understanding we had earlier on was kind of just, we're going to put it out there, whatever we get back, but obviously this is a very important issue to the city and to the city council members, so we want to make sure that the right message is what's going out there, and we'll make sure that that is described correctly. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Is there any other questions or concern? Okay.
Come up.
I'll bet you get him to open up the public hearing,
Never
just
know
saying.
if I can say anything. No, I just wanted to ask while you gentlemen are here. So if you get the bond and people vote for it, and it's a maximum of $7 million, does that then guarantee the city that there is a cemetery? And does that bond bind you then as a city that if you don't find a lot, there's domain or anything like that? Or does it mean that you just have this money, the promise of this money to work with to try it? Because I would hate for people to think the bond has passed, now we're getting a cemetery. And I just wanted some clarity on that and how that works. And if you don't do it, then can the money then just be paid back with any
We don't have the money.
penalty?
We won't get the money unless we decide to do the cemetery. We won't
So we
take
have a
that
piece of
money.
property.
So it's a
bond
working
for it.
budget to attempt to find
We
land
have
for a
that we have
cemetery without a
secured.
promise
We're
of getting.
what do they say when you're buying a
Pre-qualifying.
home? We're
Pre-approved.
Yeah, we're pre-approved. So
Okay.
we can offer you money for your property, which right now we can't because we have no way to pay you for it.
Okay.
Which I appreciate you saying what
Articulating
your
that,
questions are, so that then we can be sure to answer that question.
Right.
Yeah, well, I just
Right.
thought, well, if I'm thinking it, I'm pretty average. Other people probably are.
Aaron's itching to, are you itching to answer that?
I just was, I can speak a little bit. Just to that point, I mean, you're, by approving a ballot measure, it's not a guaranteed result, like you've said, and I think you've hit on this, you have access to the capital so that you could close, so that you're going to a landowner with actual dollars that, within 45 days, you could close on the bonds and take down the property. A bond election, approved by voters is good for 10 years. There, is the chance that it could be stayed if somebody tried to challenge it and that took a year or two to go through courts. But generally, it's good for 10 years. So during that 10-year period, so if it passed and there's not property available, and 6 years from now property became available, you could take this bond election off the shelf and then issue the bonds at that time. But, 11 years from then, you couldn't. So there is flexibility. All the bond resolutions that the city adopts will reserve the right not to issue the bonds for any reason if market conditions or something changed along the way. So there's plenty of flexibility, but as you point out, there's not a guarantee by passing a ballot that, anything occurs.
Could we get Marcus just to go over the rates and the anticipated cost, property tax increase on an average $400,000 home? Just to get on record, we haven't discussed that quite yet.
Yeah, so this would assume,
We're supposed to be done by now, that's what that
is that
Time's up.
the curtain call? Sorry.
Are you done yet?
I'll be,
Stay awake now.
I'll be very quick. So as we approve the terms, obviously these are going to change because it is dependent on interest rates and a few other things, but based off our most current estimation, this would be assuming that we issue the entire $7 million for the project, issued over 25 years. The tax impact on a primary residential home, so they would get the deduction in their taxes, would be approximately $56.46 per year. So that's how much their taxes would increase as the bond's outstanding. And then on a $400,000 business or secondary home, it'd be approximately $102 or 65 cents per year. On a monthly basis, that comes out to additional $4.70 per month for primary home and $8.55 per month on a secondary home. And that's just based off our best estimation and the full amount being issued. Obviously, that would change if we had smaller amount or paid it off early, different things like that. But we'll also put in language into the voter information pamphlet to describe the authorization, how that works, kind of the pre-qualified language, but also letting people know as soon as the bond's paid off, this tax levy would go away and only be used for cemetery project and improvements.
Thanks, Marcus. Appreciate you sharing that. And I just wanted, $7 million is the ceiling, but there is a little bit of buffer into that as we were going over some estimates. Again, it depends on the cost of land, which is, we've seen anywhere from $315,000 an acre to $735,000 an acre in Centerville. So we don't know what the cost of land will be. We don't know if it will require the demolition of any homes or buildings for the location. Maybe the land will be donated, but we do believe there's a little bit of a buffer of $1 million or even $2 million in that amount. So we hope we don't see the $7 million figure, but we just needed it just in case to create that ceiling.
Thanks, Brent. Come on up.
Somebody online wants to ask a question.
Do I need to open a public hearing back up? Keep doing this? I'm okay. All right, online, get question for us? I want to make sure everybody hears. I just want to make sure we're doing it right, so.
Oh, well, if you're going to hear from them, then you do need to reopen the public hearing.
Okay, if we're going to keep.
Hi,
Just a second. I got to reopen the public hearing. Okay, so the public hearing is reopened for the general obligation cemetery bond. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Laura Eliason, who lives in Centerville again. I do want to make a note for anybody who's online trying to comment. There's about a full minute delay from me hearing what you're saying through my phone to me seeing what's going on YouTube. So it's going to take about a minute before the online people even hear that it's time for public comment. But my questions, I had some questions about, I guess, cemetery specifics. I already have a lot in the Centerville Cemetery, and we had just asked some cemetery questions recently in which I learned about the cremation niche that they're planning, which I wasn't aware of. I think she told me how many spaces that would accommodate, but I can't remember. And that is where I learned that we could bury people too deep. I then got I had the question, can you do more than two people? Like, she was talking about full-size caskets, one on top of the other, and I wondered if that could have different arrangements. For example, I believe a cremated person takes half the length as what a casket does, so is there a possibility that the two people per cemetery plot, I'm not sure, I don't understand the reason for the limit of two people in a plot. For example, if there were two cremated people that were on the bottom level and then two cremated people on the top level, I'm not sure what kinds of regulations are with that. When I look at what do I need, I like to look at what do I already have. And if we can better utilize what we already have, I'm interested in learning more about that. I think a lot of people might not be aware that we can bury people too deep. Maybe we can change it so that you can put more people if they are cremated. I don't know if in the new cemetery that we're proposing to try to get, are we looking at possible more cremation niches? How many that would be, because that would generate income to help pay back the bond? Are we looking at, I'm just going to throw a pretend number out. Let's say that we say it's $1,000 for this plot, but it can hold two people. So is there a possibility that we can kind of urge people to go too deep, or have an area of it where we require people to be too deep? So if you want to be 1 deep, it will cost this much. If you want to be 2 deep, it will cost this much. Because if we can have everybody be 2 deep, then that doubles our space. And so as we're looking at spending the money, if we consider, are we considering people burying 1 deep? Are we considering people burying 2 deep? Not only for how much revenue can we get back out of the land, but also how many people will we be able to accommodate for a certain amount of time? What kind of options can we look into there, and how many cemetery niches might be available there? Cremation, I mean. So those are my questions that I'm having, are more kind of logistic things.
All great questions, Laura. And if the public hearing's open right now, I'll have Bruce try and answer some of those. Some of those we're not going to have an answer for right now until you get, the property you're getting as well, too. Public hearings still open. We opened it back up again. It's on the screen. On the relation to the general obligation cemetery bonds. Any further comments from the public? Okay, we're giving it a little bit of delay in case there is somebody listening in. Anyone else?
I just, one of the comments, as a resident, I'm Bruce Cox, 364 West, 1375 North Centerville. I have, one of the comments made a question that I'm just curious as a resident, because she was saying if this bond is to pass, does that mean that the city would develop a cemetery? And so that made me think, we know that there's some possibilities of different properties within the city that would be desirable. If none of the property owners are willing to sell, would this city council consider eminent domain and paying fair market value and taking the land for a city cemetery? If the citizens said, this is what we want, here's the money to do it, they passed the bond, and now is this council willing to do eminent domain to an unwilling seller?
Thanks for your question. Public hearing still open. Any further questions? Let's close the public hearing in relation to the general obligation cemetery bond. Let's, as far as your question from our resident about eminent domain, that's something that each council member is going to have to answer for themselves if they're willing to do that.
Well, and the thing that I would say in response to both Laura's comments and Bruce's question is that those are going to be policy decisions and can't be guaranteed at the time of making this decision to do the bond. We're basically saying in a very general sense, we will go shop for a place and try to find a place where we can make a cemetery work. But we've all experienced in our years here at City Council, changing cemetery policy multiple times, right? So the questions of, do we require double deep in certain areas? Do we, use eminent domain? That's going to depend on the people you have sitting here. And that changes over time, and these things don't happen instantly. So we might give you an answer tonight, but that answer won't matter one bit, because you're going to have a different council makeup by the time the details of how this cemetery thing works out.
But there are a few things that we can say. There are some soil types that don't allow double depth burial. And so if that's the type of soil where we buy the cemetery space, then we can't allow double depth burial because it's not safe for the cemetery workers who are digging. And we can also say that a niche wall spot is a little thing. Laura, there are 48 spaces in the existing niche wall that is installed in our cemetery right there by the sign at the entrance. And you can see those. I don't think they're available for sale yet, but they are installed and you can look at them. And they're about that big. I don't know. If you think maybe a foot square. That's about the size, I haven't measured, but that's about the size. It's 10 by 10 inches on the inside. So an entire person cremated fits in a 10 by 10 box. So
I think you can put 2 or 3 in.
you can probably fit more than that. I've seen people with a little vase on the mantle, and that's the entire remains once the cremation is processed.
Those who are interested in being cremated will be able to be buried in Centerville right now without this question being answered.
So Bruce, I do think you need to stand up. I'm afraid she has some misconceptions from what's been said tonight. She probably can't double depth she's saying she already has graves and she didn't know these options were available. I doubt that in her grave, she probably can do double depth.
Right, so in the existing cemetery, there is a double depth section. Speaking to the type of soil we have in our cemetery is very sandy. And so in order to do double depth burials, we have to do them in a certain way in which there is what they call a double crypt. It's a concrete box that's too high versus a single burial has a vault that's just a single casket fits in one vault. So in our double depth section, we require these double crypts so that as we dig a grave, on one side there's this concrete wall in which the soil can't cave in, the sandy soil can't cave in on that side. And we also, when we sold the double depth section, we sold the spaces not assigned. So people bought a double depth space, but it's not assigned until time of need. So they knew they would be in these 5 rows in this part of the cemetery, but it's not until time of need. And the reason for that is we dig the next grave, we dig them all in line. And that's so that you're digging undisturbed soil on one side, which is much safer from cave-in danger. And you've got a concrete wall on the other side, which makes it us able to put in double depth graves in our cemetery, the current cemetery. So where there are already existing single depth graves, we cannot do a double depth grave.
And that's what I didn't want is everybody that's got a plot now thinking, oh, I've got 2 plots all of a sudden. I don't want misinformation. And so if they only have bought a single plot and it was not in a double depth place, they cannot do double depth.
Right.
And don't we right now only allow so many?
So speaking to the next question is, how many sets of remains are allowed in a grave? And we allow 2 sets of remains in a grave. So many times there's a grandmother and maybe a stillborn infant can be placed in the same grave, or 2 sets of cremains. And the reasoning behind limiting it to 2 is mostly because of the headstone issues. The more sets of remains, all of those people want to have markers, want to have headstones, and so we limit them to 2 sets of remains, and they still have the same headstone requirement as a single grave, but they can put all of the information they want on one headstone, and that allows them to put someone's cremains or an infant in an existing grave.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we hadn't put out some false information.
And then on the
everybody thought
niches,
they
we
were.
have this council will be deciding the policies on the niches, but if the containers for the ashes are conservative, they can fit 2 sets of ashes in one niche, but they're limited to one tile to put the information, the names and dates and things that they want on one tile. So, and that would be up to this council whether they want to limit 1 set of remains per niche, or if they want to go ahead and allow, if they're willing to have a conservative container for their ashes.
I think what I would say, just in the sake of time and what we've already covered, that we've come to a good conclusion in that we've gotten good input as to what the questions are, to give Marcus direction for writing that draft. He'll get it to us, and then we also, have the open house to get more into the detailed questions that people will still have after that point.
Agreed. So that's great that thank you all for your questions. That really helps us to prepare the answers.
Thanks for the great discussion. Is there any more specific questions, those that, the caller that has a plot? We can answer those specific questions, can't we, Bruce, as far as what their spot and what they can do with their spot?
Yeah, business
Call the
office.
city.
Yeah.
Those guys calls all the time.
Yeah, and thank you, those that were here and those that called in. And we're going to move on to another part of this really quick, which is part of this discussion. This is there was an argument for the cemetery bond and and that was submitted, and there was not one that was submitted against. And we were going to, are you okay? I was going to have our city recorder read that. Jennifer, do you want to read that for us?
Sure. Okay, Centerville City proposes issuing general obligation bonds to finance land and construction of a second city cemetery. A vote in favor of the issuance of $7 million in cemetery general obligation bonds at the November 2nd election is a vote to build a new cemetery. Without this bond, there are no cemetery plots available for sale in the Centerville City Cemetery. Need. Centerville City owns and operates the Centerville City Cemetery. While Centerville has population turnover like most cities, it is a community consisting substantially of long-term residents, a large portion of which have expressed a desire to be buried in Centerville. The existing Centerville City Cemetery is 7 acres and has 5,895 burial plots. While 45% of the plots are unoccupied, all unoccupied spots have been sold. This means residents that do not own a plot may not have the ability to be buried in Centerville. Solution. Development of a new cemetery would provide an estimated 4,000 additional single-depth burial plots. These spaces would allow current and future residents the opportunity to be buried in Centerville. The City Council believes this endeavor would provide for cemetery needs for about 20 years. If the bond were to pass, the city plans to begin the search for a land purchase in 2022, with construction of the cemetery starting shortly thereafter. This will allow current and future residents to purchase future burial plots at a city cemetery. With bond rates at all-time lows, the anticipated bond would have an estimated tax impact of $4.70 a month on primary residents with home values of $400,000. Timing. This is a good time to issue bonds because interest rates are at very low levels, giving the city the opportunity to issue bonds with reduced interest expense. If the city delays this project, there is a good chance that the price of the project and interest rates may rise significantly. Additionally, there are limited property parcels which might be useful for a cemetery, and waiting could eliminate the ability to find appropriate land. Summary. The city recognizes this is an important project to many residents of Centerville. However, in order for the city to fund the project, it must issue a bond secured by a property tax levy. The anticipated property tax increase on a $400,000 primary residential home is estimated to be a $4.70 monthly increase, or $56.46 annually. As plots are sold, there will be amounts set aside to repay the bond. However, there may be penalty payments if the bond is repaid in less than 10 years. The bond is scheduled to last for a maximum of 26 years. A major portion of plot sales proceeds will be used to accelerate bond payments to the extent possible. The city will evaluate payment options after 10 years and attempt to minimize the actual duration of the property tax collections. Do I need to read the contact info too?
And that was the argument for. No opposing argument was submitted at the time when this was advertised or put out there. So that was part of the requirement too, that we need to read that. We have our marching orders. Marcus, why aren't you drafting it already? Just teasing. Thank you, Marcus and Aaron, for being here and for everybody that participated. Let's move on to the fraud risk assessment, item number 6 on our agenda. Nate?
All right, thank you, Mayor.
Jennifer, could I have you pull up the fraud risk assessment? While she's doing that, I'll give you some background on this. The fraud risk assessment is something that's required from the Utah State Auditor. It was implemented about 2 years ago. So this is the second time that it's being presented to the City Council. Part of the requirement is that we do this annually, and it's another requirement that we present it to the city's governing board. So that's why we're here tonight. So how this works is we have this fraud risk assessment. It has a series of questions, and if we are able to answer yes to the question, then we get the allotted points. It's an all or nothing point system, so if we don't get, half the points or anything, it's all or nothing. So here it is before you. We have a total points of 375, which puts us in the very low risk level. This is 5 points more than it was in fiscal year 20, and that is because the city adopted a policy on reporting fraud and abuse. So good job because of that. We earned 5 more points. The only thing that we did not earn points on was question number 8, which is, does the entity have a formal internal audit function, which we do not. I think a city of our size, it would be difficult to have an employee just for that. However, we as a finance staff, we do have some internal controls and some checks that we do to not fulfill the question, but to fulfill the role of an internal auditor, some checks and balances that we use. But yeah, is there any questions?
Thanks for filling it all out.
Yeah, no problem.
I looked at it, and I was glad I didn't have to answer them all, so.
Wasn't too bad.
How many years we done this? Is this the second?
It's just the second.
I remember the first one, yeah. Yeah, like Councilwoman Ivy says, thank you for going through all that. Any further questions?
What is question number 4? Wait.
Okay, so
No, I have 5.
Question number 5. It's have all the board members completed the state auditor online training at least once in the past 4 years. So that's a training that you'll go to the state
Who are the
auditor's
board members?
website. Sorry,
Us.
You, City Council.
I think we did it
We
last
did it
January.
yeah.
We did do it last year.
Okay.
Yeah, we had record that everybody did it last year when this
generates
fraud
a
risk was
form.
assigned.
I think I did it in January.
And then in January, whoever gets reelected will do it again. So that's how we'll keep track of it, is when a new official gets elected, we'll have them go
Okay.
take that training.
I didn't remember that.
It's been a while, but it was really fun.
Got a certificate for it.
Good job, us.
Thanks, Nate.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Item number 7, this is bids that were reserved for the 2021-2022 street sweeping project. Brant, you want to tell us a bit about this? I don't see Kevin here.
This is just yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. This is just the agreement that we approve every year for street sweeping. I believe the bid has gone up slightly, but they are still, I'm pulling up the bid tabulation right now, just make sure I'm not up. So Jaquetta sweeping, again, is the lowest bid, or actually the recommended bid, because of our previous relationship with Jaquetta. So you can see the previous bids, the price has gone up from $48,000 to $52,000. But they are still providing a valuable service to our community. So we're going to continue outsourcing this because I don't think we have any interest in purchasing the equipment and maintaining it that we need to. So it's better for us to contract this out.
So questions for Brant on that, or if not, I guess we want a motion that or this project being awarded to Jaquetta.
They sweep the dirt all over my brand-new clean car today. I want you to.
You want me to pass that on?
The street
Councilmember
sweeper,
Meekum?
well, it was kind of my fault because I was trying to turn my light on and he was in the gutter, and I was having to go behind him, and I just left the car wash, so he got dust all over my car. That's all right, I'll still vote for him.
You making a motion then?
Sure, I'll make a motion.
Proof that she
So
doesn't hold
moved.
grudge. Second.
All right, all in favor, roll call on that one? Okay. Councilman Hitz?
Aye.
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 That motion passes 4-0. Thank you. Item number 8, minutes review and acceptance for September 21, 2021 work session, city council and closed session minutes. Do we have any changes? If not, do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
Make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. City council report. Councilwoman Fillmore.
Yeah. Okay, so South Davis Recreation District, there's been a lot going on. I don't know if you all are aware that we had some problems with the roofing deck over the leisure pool area. And so that is a huge project that we've undertaken, or currently undertaking. So currently the leisure pool area has been closed, but the install should be completed today. Roof liner will be repaired, and decking starts tomorrow or Wednesday. Then the leisure pool ceiling needs to be repainted, and we're updating ductwork, ventilation, and the air handler unit, which was a big part of the problem. So the lap pool then is scheduled to shut down October 25th to upgrade ventilation, ductwork, and install a new rooftop unit there as well. So we had our executive director come visit about the bond question for the master plan. And we have decided to move that to 2022 so that we're very diligently working on exploring different possible locations for the expansion. But wanted to be able to give the voters more concrete information before we asked. So that's where we're at with that. So diligently plowing ahead to solidify what the options might look like. Also working with Bountiful City about where the location exactly would be of the 50-meter pool, which is a major part of what's proposed in the master plan. And it would just be directly tied to the existing center and just kind of reach out into the park space at Bountiful. So that's the plan for that, and we're working on laying that out in design with them.
To the south or to the west?
Right now, it's going to be southeast. So it would actually remove the Bowery, the big Bowery that's so large and doesn't get used that much. They're probably going to rebuild that smaller and closer to the playground area. So we think it would get used more than. All right. Yeah. So they are having Spooktacular. We have our Thanksgiving races, which are always a ton of fun. Fall soccer's wrapping up, and they just shout out a big thank you to the relationship with the community park. It's been wonderful to utilize those fields. So of interest is that Thursday public skating will be offering free skate rentals to members through November 18th. So, and the ice ribbon, I don't know if you got to try out or enjoy the ice ribbon last year, but it's fantastic fun. So that will be November or December, depending on weather. And then another great thing is some adaptive rec programs. And so we're just providing the facility, but there are established organizations that will come in and do the facilitating of the programs for those with special needs. So that's what's been going on at the rec center.
So the rec center controls the ice ribbon. The ice ribbon is up by the new park on
Yeah, so the ice ribbon
Main
was
Street, right?
an interlocal agreement situation with Bountiful City. So Bountiful City paid for the construction fully of the rec center, or of the ice ribbon, I'm sorry. And then we run the operations, but they end up net positive. So, so we run the operations, and then the financial commitment then is, as there are future capital improvement maintenance needs, then it's 50/50. So.
Did not realize that.
Okay, and then as far as parks, I don't want to take too much time, but, you know, we're on the brink of some really exciting next steps, right? So we had that work session, that was great. And I was talking to Bruce earlier today about just kind of communicating with the council about being ready to see that this process is going to really get going. So we've got a substantial amount of funds accumulated in the RAP tax account right now. And we have the opportunity to apply for grants that would be matching grants. Some of them would be state, which wouldn't have the same kind of restrictions that we have with the federal, but we could also apply for the federal and the state grants and hope to get matching grants. And a couple of the different projects is if you guys read and saw the attachment in the weekly report from Brant last week, the layout of possible pickleball courts at Randall, the Randall property. And that's something that we should talk about and decide right away, I think, if we think we might want to go for a grant to do that. Because if we decide that one way or another right away, then we can do the irrigation and landscaping, depending on which way we decide. And, you know, the amazing thing about that location would be that it would reduce, you know, looking to what the severe drought that we've been in, and rather than planting a bunch of grass, spending a lot of money on irrigation, you know, maybe considering that it would be a more expensive solution, but it would be a long-term, more maintenance-free solution that it would take, you know, 1/10 of the water to do it with the planned pickleball courts that were drawn up. And with the matching grants, we could do that project like next year, you know, by 2022, or by the end of 2022 maybe, and have, well, I can't remember, was it 6 pickleball courts drawn up in that space? And maybe spend, so the cost of putting the pickleball courts there would be like $300,000, and we could get a matching grant to pay for half of that. And we have, my understanding is about $400,000 in the RAP fund right now. So this is all a discussion. The details of all this will be for another night, but my point is to just have staff and council and mayor aware to get these things on the agenda and get going, because the council would need to decide what we want to possibly apply for, right? Because the other major project that we'd be applying for is all of the upgrades at the community park. So we need to do that budget analysis of what half of these projects would be. Do we have the funds available? If we're applying for matching grants, do we want to apply for one or other of them, or do we want to apply for both of them? And I bring all this up tonight in my report because we know how fast the months go by, and these applications are going to be due in May. And so I'd like to see these issues and items get on the agendas immediately, so that we can have the information decided, have time to draw up conceptual plans, submit the applications that the council would like to see submitted. And as far as approving the master plan, I think the Parks Committee is going to take one last detailed comb through of it and then bring it to you. So if you're all in agreement, we'd like to put that on the agenda right away after they've done that. But they also talked about maybe doing it at the same time as when they've had a chance to do that priority project list that we talked about in the work session. And so that timeline would probably be about January, February, if everybody's comfortable with just seeing those two things at the same time in that 3 or 4 month timeline. So those are the things that have been going on.
I like it. Great report. Questions for her?
Pretty amazing to think that maybe we could get pickleball courts just that soon.
That
I think
is.
We were all
Yeah,
thinking,
I'd
well,
love it.
maybe in 5 or 10 years, you know.
I didn't know there was that much money that was unallocated. We need to.
I didn't either. Well, I'm not the, accountant for the city, but we'll do a deeper dive.
Okay.
Let's just get it on the agenda, though.
Very good, detailed report. Thank you. Item number 10, Mayor's Report. I am going to go in more detail next meeting, but I do want to bring up that I went to the league meetings last week, attended a half a dozen sessions. I don't know, maybe I was just in a good mood this one, but there were some fabulous, fabulous sessions. And I'll just give you a preview of one session I went to was on collaboration. And I thought about when we went through the windstorm about how we had contacts. I had contacts with other mayors, our police chief had contacts with other police chiefs, our Parks and our Public Works Director had contacts, Bruce had contacts. A lot of those were within Davis County, which was fabulous. We did this, obviously get some from the state, but the panel had Cedar City's mayor and how they were able to get Cedar City and Enoch 25,000 sandbags when they only said they needed 3. Not from cities right around them, but all the way from up here on the Wasatch Front. And it was a great meeting of many mayors of joining together saying, yes, that outreach of being able to possibly go further if we don't have it right in our community. I mean, that was one of the best sessions I went to, and just a little preview of, I'll type up some other things that I feel that will relate to you and pass that on as well too. But so that's my brief report given the lateness of the hour. But so stay tuned for that. Just want to give you a preview. Any questions? City Manager's report, Brent?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I have three items. Well, now 4. I do want to touch on Councilmember Fillmore's rap tax just for a moment. I'll start with that. We do have $429,000 in that account. I believe we're obligated $282,000 this year for Island View and $107,000 for our South Davis rec payment. But I will say that our sales tax has been healthy. I'll share that last month, not September, but August, we actually generated $150,000 in our sales tax revenue above the previous year. So we are seeing the RAP tax is benefiting from this increase in sales tax. So that's a reason why we're doing much better in our RAP tax. But also we need to commit 5% to Whitaker and Centerpoint. So I do want to sit down with Nate and we'll have more accurate numbers for that conversation. Jennifer will be adding that to a future council agenda item. But I think that'd be a great conversation to see what we can do if we want to, or if we want to look at, in the Smith Park or Community Park and wait until we get our wetland permits all figured out. So there'll be options. That'll be a great conversation to be had to see what we can do there.
Brent, just one thought too, that remembering that the Randall property is new park acreage. And so the impact fees that we'll be expecting from the Hive and the Symphony Homes would not necessarily need to be transferred to the RAP tax, as far as I understand. Of course, I'm not the expert, but that maybe it could just get spent straight from impact fees. So that's something to consider as well.
Yeah, we'll discuss that as well. What options do we have? There are certain obligations, repayments we need to make, but we'll go into those details at that meeting and we'll show exactly what we have available. It'd be great to see some more investment in our parks in Centerville for sure. Next item, I will hold off on my LCT update. I will say I sent out in the weekly update on Saturday, I believe was when I sent it out. I did mention that we'd like to meet with our state legislatures here sooner than we did last year. And if there's any, I'd like to come with an agenda specifically, 3 items. And so if there's items that you're thinking that we need to discuss, let's get those items down. It may be a list of 10 items, but we may only want to focus on 3, but I'd like the council to kind of determine those priorities when we meet with our representatives. This year, there are going to be a number of challenging issues, in particularly in the planning and zoning. Affordable housing is still going to be an issue. The league, we had a number of conversations, particularly with the city manager groups and how we prepare. We've discussed police wages and seeing that increase and how our city is responding to Salt Lake. So there's a lot of information to be had as we have our conversations going forward. And that's just kind of a brief update from the league conference.
Brian, I'd like go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead. I'll wait till the end.
No, go for it, Mayor.
I like your idea of getting together with them earlier, or at least getting them on the calendar, because their Januaries fill up really quick. But if we could reach out to them now and get something on the calendar, be a great idea. So I like everybody getting their 3 ideas in.
Right. All right. Thanks, Mayor. I want to thank Bryce. You may have seen it on Facebook, but he has coordinated a Centerville City night with the Utah Grizzlies hockey team on October 23rd, Saturday, October 23rd. Bryce is really great about trying to figure out ideas of how to get employees and creating events to get our residents together. I believe he's still working on a cornhole tournament for our employees. Again, just some friendly competition. So I really appreciate Bryce thinking of these ideas of how to get us together outside of work and develop those relationships outside of work. So tickets are $10 to $20. They're reduced. I don't know what they normally are, but I plan on attending that, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. Saturday, October 23rd, Utah Grizzlies hockey team. I think it'll be a lot of fun. And then there's an idea that tonight is an example of one of those ideas that Bryce and Jennifer and I have been discussing, more so between Bryce and myself, and that is advertising these city council meetings a little bit better on social media. Like, for example, tonight would have been a good opportunity for us to say, come to the public hearing. But also with that is maybe an after action on Wednesday. We actually share with the community what the results were or what was voted on that the night before the city council meeting. Again, just to inform the public, let them know what has been voted on that impacts them. So we'll be stepping up that process of how to, again, just inform the residents what's happening at meetings, as well as giving them somewhat of a summary of what the results were. Those are the items I have, Mr. Mayor, unless there's any questions.
Questions? Thank you, Brent. Okay, we do have one quick item that we need to discuss in a closed session, so I would look, unless there's anything else, for
Make a motion to adjourn city council meeting to a closed session with no intent to return to general session.
To discuss real estate.
You stated the reason.
Maybe he doesn't know.
I don't know the reason.
Property.
Oh, to discuss the acquisition of property?
Uh-huh.
Or sale.
For sale.
Or acquisition or sale of property, excuse me.
Yes.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Council's closed.